It was early September in central Idaho, and fall had begun to paint the Lemmy mountain range in flecks of amber and crimson among the sea of pine forests. The air was crisp, carrying that chill that signaled the start of elk hunting season. To find the best herds in this area of Idaho, at this time of year, you have to climb high, really high. During the summer, elk favor the high-elevation pine forests, where the vegetation is lusher and the temperatures cooler than the sagebrush valley below. As winter caps the ranges in blankets of snow, the elk slowly migrate to the valley floor. It's the animal's natural cycle and one predictable enough to help look for them during hunting season. Over Labor Day weekend, my closest two friends, Tyson and John, and I decided to take a week off work to hunt elk in the Lemmy Range. We'd been friends since childhood, but life had a way of pulling us apart. Families, careers, responsibilities. This trip was our chance to reconnect, to revisit the camaraderie that we'd always cherished. We loaded Tyson's truck and drove for over an hour northwest from Idaho Falls into the heart of Idaho's remote central mountains. We turned off the little two-lane highway, the one that snakes up the little lost valley, until we got to a familiar turnoff and headed up an old Forest Service road, FS 126. That little dusty road, no bigger than a dirt path, winds and curves through an unnamed canyon into the heart of the mountains. The Forest Service has long since let the road fall into disrepair, but we navigated a couple of washed-out sections at the base of the canyon, and once we were up beyond the tree line, the road was more solid. It was slow going through, though. The way was littered with fallen rocks and tangled tree limbs that continually blocked our path. After stopping every few minutes to clear the debris, John and I decided to hike ahead, removing obstacles while Tyson navigated the truck behind us. It was a long climb up the switchbacks to the top, but as we reached the ridgetop, the remnants of an old mining claim came into view. Cleared and flattened back in the 1960s, the site now served as an ideal base camp. We set up our tents and kindled a fire just as the sun began to descend, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground. Gathered around the flames, we lost ourselves in conversation. We reminisced about old adventures and shared new stories about our kids and jobs. I swear we must have been laughing the whole time. The stars emerged one by one, punctuating the deepening darkness of the sky. The world was still and at peace. Suddenly, though, John raised a hand, his expression turning serious. "Did you hear that?" he said. We all fell silent, the crackling of the fire punctuating the quiet night. Then I heard it too, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching through the underbrush. They were deliberate and unhurried, obviously drawing closer with each passing moment. We exchanged glances, a mixture of curiosity and caution. Perhaps a deer, we thought, or maybe a bear wandering nearby. But then, emerging from behind the veil of pine trees, a man stepped into the circle of firelight. We froze. He approached us as if strolling into a neighborhood bar. His walk was casual, his demeanor affable. A bright smile spread across his face. We were totally caught off guard and watched him approach in silence. His hair was disheveled, and he had thick stubble across his face, like he hadn't seen a bathroom in weeks. He was dressed in a well-fitting tailored suit, oddly pristine for someone trekking through the wilderness. The style was decades out of fashion. The seams were subtly frayed. What caught our attention most, though, were his shoes. White sneakers, spotless and unscuffed, improbably clean given the circumstances. It was like he walked out of his house and right into our camp. "Evening, gentlemen," he greeted us with a smile and a nod. In the shifting firelight, his age seemed ambiguous to me. What I mean is that he could have been 30 or maybe even 50. "Evening," we all replied hesitantly. "I'm Mike," he offered, taking a seat on a fallen log without invitation. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" "Sure is," Tyson replied with a slight waver. It made me feel a little better knowing my friends were just as bewildered about this situation as I was. We engaged in small talk, though the conversation felt forced. Mike mentioned that he was an accountant with a family, but when we asked for details, he either ignored the question or would wave it away dismissively, as if swatting at a persistent mosquito. What threw me off was his mispronunciation of his supposed hometown's name, though. He called it Boise and not Boise. That didn't sit well with me. It was like he was reciting lines from a script and was unable or unwilling to deviate and improvise. When he wasn't talking, he hummed a tune softly, swaying ever so slightly. His gaze drifted, not quite meeting ours, often focusing just beyond us into the darkness. It felt as if he were expecting someone or something to appear from the shadows almost. If he felt uneasy or worried about something, he certainly didn't show it on his happy face, though. Tyson finally broke the uneasy rhythm. "So, you out here camping alone?" he asked. Mike seemed momentarily puzzled, then smiled broadly. "Oh, just enjoying the wilderness," he replied. "You know, if something awful were to happen out here, it'd be a long time before anyone found out. This county's the size of Delaware, and they've only got 6 sheriff's deputies." He then chuckled, the sound hollow. An uncomfortable silence settled over us. John shot me a glance that mirrored my own unease. "Huh, is that so?" I managed to say. "Yep," Mike continued, gazing up at the canopy of the stars. "We're a long, long way from anywhere." His mood shifted abruptly, the jovial facade slipping into a vacant stare. The firelight cast eerie shadows across his face, deepening the lines and hollowing his features. "Hey, are you feeling alright?" John asked, truly worried about the guy. He snapped back into reality. That smile returned. "Never better," he assured us. "Don't worry, I'm not crazy or anything, boys. Not a murderer or a demon or anything." He sort of laughed lightly at this, but there was an unsettling edge to it. Tyson's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Look, man, are you on something? You're acting kind of strange." Mike ignored the question, humming that same little melody. The sway returned, his eyes distant. I decided now that it was time to wrap things up. I tried the only method that made sense in the moment. Standing, I slapped my knee in that old Idaho way. "Well, it's getting late," I said, forcing a smile. "We've got an early morning ahead." Mike nodded slowly. "Yes, lots to do." As he stood, a large hunting knife slipped from his jacket pocket, landing blade first into the soil. "Oops," he said casually, retrieving it. "Can't forget this. You never know what kind of crazy folks you might run into way out here, you know." We watched in tense silence as he slid the knife back into his pocket. His gaze swept over us one last time, still not quite meeting our eyes. "You boys take care now," he said, softly. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the darkness, the sound of his footsteps fading into the quiet of the night. We stood there, the fire casting long shadows, the weight of the encounter settling upon us. Sleep, it didn't come easily that night. Every rustle of the wind, every creak of the trees seemed amplified, our senses tuned to the slightest disturbance. The next morning, we debated whether to pack up and leave, but ultimately decided to stay. We had come here to reconnect after all, and weren't about to let one strange encounter ruin our trip. Yet, as we hiked through the mountains in search of elk, we just couldn't shake the feeling of being watched the whole time. We never did see Mike again, but his presence certainly lingered. An unspoken question hanging in the crisp mountain air above us. Who was he? What had brought him to our camp that night? Where did he go? We'll probably never know the truth, unfortunately. So me, 29 and male, my girlfriend, female and 27, my friend or roommate, male and 28, and my girlfriend's sister, female and 26, moved into some new apartments about a year ago. We haven't had anything weird happen at all, besides the occasional sound every now and then that nobody thinks much about. But in the last 6 months or so, the balcony door will just open. We live on the 3rd floor, no fire escape. It would happen often enough to where we had to be sticklers about locking the balcony door. The rule is that if you unlock the balcony door, you have to lock it back up or it will come open and the cats will get out. Well, we stopped having a problem with the door opening altogether at some point. And about 2 hours before sharing this, I heard someone yanking the heck out of the balcony door. I'm the first one to wake up at like 4 a.m. to get ready for work. Today I happened to be sitting in the living room 10 feet away from this door while sipping on some coffee, and I heard the door handle squeak and the door yank really hard enough in fact for the blinds on the door to stir from the force and stay moving for a good minute. I stared at the door trying to figure out what had just happened. I looked at the lock and saw that it was still deadbolted. Both cats came over to investigate. One of them had their tail puffed up. I just couldn't figure it out and I'd had enough, so I ran to my bedroom and sat there sipping my coffee. The 2 cats followed closely behind. I was sitting on the bed trying to explain away what had just happened when I could hear the door yank again with a slightly lesser force. I continued to sit in the room out of fear, and I began looking up stories of negative air pressure opening doors and how that works in an effort to find an explanation. But nothing accounts for the door handle squeaking from turning at the same time. I then heard the door yank again, and this time my frustration overcame my fear. I bolted out of my room. I found my friend or roommate, male and 28, standing in the living room. He looked startled from me popping up like I did, but immediately said the balcony door was open. It was freezing in the living room now from the chilly night and the door being just wide open. He understandably must have been a little frustrated too, but I mentioned that the door was locked and told him about what had just happened. I'm not entirely sure if he believes me or not, but he didn't object because the door opening has been a problem for a while. I am a skeptic, always have been. I'm always able to explain things away, but this one, I'm just stumped by. I guess I'm here just looking for explanations as to what this could be, and that if it involves the paranormal, what should I do about it? What I just witnessed is the weirdest thing I've seen outside of movies, so please, debunk it if you think you can. I'll try to respond to any questions below in the comments. I'm going to work now and I'll be there all day for the most part, so I'll get to them when I can. Also, just quickly, I spoke with my roommates. It was confirmed that the door was fully latched and locked that night. I did a full inspection of the door, the hinges, the strike plate, and even the latch mechanisms. The hinges are very tight, not even a little bit of play in them. The deadbolt is working very well and to the fullest degree. The door handle is pretty wobbly, but the rest of the mechanism is fine, which is strange because it didn't used to be like that, and we almost never used that door. I looked for looseness in the strike plate and any unusual bends or anything, but there aren't any. Every bit of the door just works great. I tried yanking on the door myself. There's no way that there can be any movement, let alone enough to cause the blinds to move to the degree that they did. I positioned the handle mechanism to sit just loose enough on the strike plate to not latch but not fully open either. This was very difficult to do, but I then yanked the door a few times, and it takes a great amount of force with both hands to pull the door open from this position. If wind or negative air pressure was the issue, it would have taken a heck of a lot. Which I'm not saying is impossible, but there would be obvious evidence of this for sure. But even if this was the case, the deadbolt was fully latched, like I said. It is also confirmed that there were no windows open that night anyway. I remember it being a very still morning in terms of wind, in fact, and I asked my co-workers along with my roommates if it had been windy at any point in case I missed it. But everyone said that it was not windy in the slightest at all, not even a breeze. I feel really weird coming to the conclusion that an ethereal being of some kind opened my door forcefully. but it's looking more and more like I will have to accept this as my answer. I'm still open to any other ideas to investigate or reasons to explore what could have caused this, but I'm running out of answers, and that is pretty frightening. I grew up in a small town, primarily Hispanic, where everyone knew everything. We had something here and there, of course, but other than that, not too much stuff happens. I'm overweight, to put it simply, and not to the standards of beauty, really. I remember reading a meme online once where it was a joke about "can't catch me or kidnap since you can't carry me, keep eating cake," and laughed at that and was like, so true. I didn't realize that would all come back and bite me, though. I was 18 to 19-ish, I believe anyway, and it was nighttime. My weed plug was doing a stash and dash, and being broke and desperate, I went for it. I figured I grew up here and I know all the areas pretty well, and what made this more tempting too is that it was actually not far from my area at all. So I said, to heck with it. I was on a video call with my boyfriend and told him that I was going to go for it. He stays on the phone with me and I head out. Mind you, it's late. The areas that I have to cross through are not well lit, and I leave with nothing on me. Not even my taser, alarm, and pepper spray my dad always made me have. Oh, and to make things worse too, I snuck out because I didn't want my dad to know that I was hunting for weed. So this is already starting out great, right? But I set off. I have to cross railroad tracks to get through to the area, which is pitch black, only the main road in the distance lighting it up, and some lights from a warehouse nearby. But other than that, it's pretty hard to see. I make my way towards the main road and notice a semi parked on the side of the road. Not unusual. Semis parked there all the time, ever since I was little in fact, so nothing too weird. Then I hear a holler or hey, and I look over there and see a man in a semi-truck. He looked generic. I'm not gonna lie, a Mexican man with a red long sleeve. He looked like any other man that I'd seen around town. But his smile, I don't know, it just seemed a bit off. In any case, I waved, being polite. He gestured for me to come over and start speaking Spanish. But I don't know Spanish. I know what you're thinking. 1, why don't you know Spanish if you grew up in a Hispanic town? And 2, why aren't you running? My parents never taught me, so sue me. And 2, he was far, so I just kept walking. So I just sort of sheepishly respond, I don't speak Spanish, in Spanish. I learned that phrase just to say it to people, and wave him off quickly, walking away. My boyfriend asks me who's that, and I just tell him some random semi-truck driver. I go on with the night. I think I've been out for 40 minutes at this point, and realize that I'm not going to find it. Big sad, right? So I start heading home, still on the phone with my boyfriend. I keep talking and my phone is dying, which is actually what made my boyfriend tell me to go home. So I start walking back and I go down the road and look down the pitch black area where the railroad is, and I stopped. I just had a bad feeling all of a sudden. Something told me not to go home just yet. I tell my boyfriend that I'm going to go look at the other end of the street. That was towards where the warehouse was, giving off the light and passing empty trailers partially hidden by the shadows. I start walking and make it into the light, and I hear movement behind me and a hey. I turned around really quick and saw the same semi-truck driver again, with the same smile that he had before. He came out from behind a trailer that he was apparently hiding behind. He had his right hand tucked into his pocket and was positioning his body to where he was hiding whatever that he had more. He told me to come here and started getting closer to me. I immediately tell my boyfriend to wake up his dad and come to get me. I backed up quick and was trying really hard to think of what to do next. He saw me on the phone and immediately had a mad and annoyed look on his face. He stopped and actually started hiding behind the trailers more. Seeing that, I book it down the road telling my boyfriend to come and get me or have his dad come and get me. I didn't want to call my dad because even in this moment, for some reason, I was still terrified of getting caught sneaking out. I ran across the main road to the little mini-mart across the street and hid behind an ice machine. I told my boyfriend that I need to call someone and hang up on him, and call my friend who, thank God, was out with his girlfriend. I tell him that I'm in danger and need him to come and get me, and then I tell him where I'm at. Now, while I was waiting for them, I stayed behind the ice machine, and while I was waiting there, I saw this guy Semi again. I saw him looking around for me and shake his head in disappointment before driving off. Even in that moment, I still didn't feel safe, not until my friend pulled up anyway. Everything just sort of hit me too once he got out of the car, and I hugged him crying. His girlfriend and him calmed me down and took me home. I got a little bit of a lecture from my boyfriend, but I'd rather take that lecture than anything else I could have experienced that night. I was lucky, way too lucky. The false sense of security my weight and looks gave me really shattered after that too, and I'm glad for it. But I won't lie, it still terrifies me to think of just how things could have turned out if I didn't have my boyfriend on the phone with me that night. So this happened around a year ago, but I wrote this out in my notes around an hour after it had happened and forgot to share it. So my mum, stepdad and I, we're driving about 2.5 to 3 hours away to pick up our new motorhome. We stopped at the gas station and I ran inside with Mum to grab some food while my stepdad filled the motorhome with gas. Mum went to speak with him and I dropped my stuff off in the car and then went around to find her as she came around to find me. I came around the back of the motorhome and heard Mum say, "Why are you hiding?" And I assumed that she was talking to the dog in the car. I started sneezing. Sunlight makes me sneeze sometimes, I don't know why. And Mum turned to look at me. Her eyes got wide though, and she looked totally freaked out. I was confused and asked what had happened, assuming the dog was being weird. I got into the front seat as Mum did that weird stressed sort of panicked laugh cry thing, and this is the conversation that ensued. "Mum, what happened? What did she, the dog, do?" Mum didn't say anything, just sort of looked freaked. "What is it? Was Ripley being weird?" "No, you." "What? Why? I saw you in the back seat." Apparently, Mum got to the car and saw me laying on the floor of the back seat, grinning up at her like I was being goofy and trying to scare her. The "why are you hiding" comment was directed towards me when she heard me sneezing. And she turned and she saw me, and her eyes got wide and she whipped back around to see that the me in the back seat had actually vanished. Mum, rightly so too, started crying because, yeah, that's freaky, right? I mean, imagine seeing your child in the back seat, being a little weirdo with a grin that doesn't seem menacing, but then hearing that same child in a different location and looking back to see the child in the car was now gone. The smile went from a "ha-ha, I'm so weird" to very menacing apparently and scary, she said. The other occurrence was similar too, this time involving my brother R, who was 16. This was a couple of months back, in fact. The details are a bit foggy, so bear with me. My brother was in the living room when I came out of my room and stopped in the door to the living room. He and I chatted for a minute, with him looking at me as we did. He looked down at his phone when it dawned on him that I had actually left over an hour before to go to the store. I wasn't home, in other words. He looked back up, and apparently I was gone. Around 20-ish minutes later, I returned home and he was still there, a little freaked out. He told me, and we were very confused as to what it could have been. On top of that, I've heard my family calling me numerous times, only to find that they haven't. The most notable involving R and Mum as well. One night I was at my desk and heard R call my name, so I got up going to his room to see what he wanted. He said though that he didn't call me, but We stood talking for a minute. I turned on my heel to leave, and as I did, heard Mum call my nickname, Monkey. So I did a 180 heading to her room. But when I went in, she said that she hadn't called me either. It was memorable since it happened twice in a matter of minutes. I do know that we have at least 2 spirits in my house, one attached to my mum and one to me. Nothing has ever seemed hostile. I mean, the worst thing that they have done is move stuff around, which has made me late a few times, I'll admit, but apart from this, nothing else really sinister has happened, so I can only guess that, well, they're not evil or anything. This happened a few years back, but it stuck with me because of how weird and scary it was. So every year for the past few years, my parents have been going on a week-long anniversary trip, leaving me home alone. I was 20, so it was more than an appropriate age. And well, this time around, some weird stuff happened the first day that they were gone, and then this happened the night before they were supposed to come home. So the first day they were gone, a guy came to the door to drop something off in the morning, but I didn't want to answer it as it was a stranger, and I thought that he would just leave it at the door like usual. Well, he stayed for about 5 minutes, and then got into his car and started to drive off, to which I went outside because I thought that he'd finally left it. This man, though, got out of his car, leaving it in the middle of the road, just to give me my package that I didn't have to sign for at all. No signature needed for anything. Wasn't dressed like a delivery person. Was in a beat-up car. Very weird and uncomfortable for sure. Anyway, skipping to the end of the week, I was just chilling out in my living room, and all of a sudden at like 11 at night, I see this rather large figure approach my front door. The glass is dimpled, so you can't see features but just a silhouette, and starts banging on my door, and he did so for like a minute straight. He stands there and doesn't leave for probably 10 minutes, and in the time, he just beats on the door a few times over. Luckily, my sister and her family live not even a mile away from me, so I call them and her husband comes to get me. By this time, I'm in full panic mode and I realize that my dogs are in the backyard. My back door is like 90% glass, and I was horrified that this person was going to come through the back gate and try to come into my house as my dogs were barking up a storm. Anyways, I get my dogs inside the house and my brother-in-law finally shows up, and whoever was there was now gone. He takes me to my sister's house and we check the front door cameras to see who was there. But the cameras, they had been turned off the whole time that this person was there, and for an hour before he started banging on my door, which was weird because the cameras had been on before that time period and during the time that we were looking at the cameras, but they were somehow shut off for about an hour and a half, which was odd because they're not the type that needs to be charged and they've never glitched before then, but were actually very sensitive to any movement really. To this day, I still don't know who it was that showed up at the house that night. I checked the local news and everything, but nothing ever really came of it. I don't know if they were trying to rob my house or if they had other plans, or if it was potentially the weird delivery guy from earlier that week, but it still freaks me out to think about it, and I hate being home alone at night now because of it. Truth be told, I'm not sure what this is. Maybe a mimic, a ghost. I'm not really sure, but maybe someone out there can tell me what they think. This happened several years ago. My sister and her husband were going on vacation for a few days and asked me to dog sit for them. They have quite a few dogs. I agreed as I've dog sat for them a number of times before then and since then too. The first night I stayed over that week, their rather elderly yellow lab, Lacey, started to get a little bit agitated. It was about 10 p.m. and I thought maybe Lacey was nervous because it was close to bedtime and my sister and brother-in-law weren't home. As I mentioned, Lacey was elderly and going blind and deaf, and I thought that she might be having some separation anxiety. I tried to reassure her, and I figured that sticking to her usual routine as much as possible would help calm her nerves a bit. She usually slept in their bedroom, so I was trying to coax her in there to go to bed. I said, "Come on, Lacey, go lay down." I said something similar in a calming tone several times, but after the final time, I heard a voice repeat back to me, "Go lay down." It was a man's voice, and it was crystal clear. It was so clear, in fact, that for a second I thought maybe my sister and her husband had come home early. But then I realized that I would have heard the garage door open. They always use the garage door instead of the front door to go in and out of the house. Plus, the other dogs would have lit up with barking excitement if they had walked in. I looked around and nobody was there. Like I said too, I have dog sat for them many times, and that is the only time I have ever experienced anything like that. To this day, I still don't know what it was. I'm not typically a believer in the paranormal or anything, but I just cannot explain it. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I would estimate I was 15 or 16, living in Golden, Colorado at the time. I spent a lot of time with my good friend Kat, who lived in a double-wide trailer with her mum, Chris. When I first met them, they had a roommate renting their spare room, but after he moved out, it turned into a bit of a hobby supply dumping ground for a while. It was a nice-sized room with an attached bathroom, so Chris eventually dedicated a few days to getting things organized, moving in a twin-sized bed and old TV, and making it a functional guest room. What had previously been mountains of fabric and uncontained bobbins of thread, random boxes of buttons and free-roaming skeins of yarn, was suddenly a clean and inviting bedroom, with a closet of neatly labeled boxes and drawers, everything folded and in its own predetermined place. Chris was so excited to show it off to me, as she knew that I would be the person sleeping in there most frequently, and it was a great upgrade from either the couch or the floor of Kat's room. Now, when Kat and I had sleepovers, our favorite pastime was to stay up late getting good and creeped out. Slender Man was first gaining popularity in creepypastas, Marble Hornets was being released on the Tube of View, and we were falling down the rabbit hole, not quite sure whether it was all made up or if there was some truth to the stories and sightings being frequently recounted all over the internet. But this was the first night that I would have to pick myself up after our fright fest and go sleep alone in the newly appointed guest room. It had gotten late that night. We had run out of new creepy online videos, and we had even played a few rounds of the recently released Slender game on her laptop. Much as I didn't want to, it was time for bed, and so I went across the hall, climbed into the slightly squeaky metal-framed bed, and took a few deep breaths to help calm myself asleep. My eyes were closed, and my body was starting to relax. But that was when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps creaking across the floor inside of my room. My hair immediately stood up on end, all over my arms, and I could feel the familiar tingle of adrenaline in the nape of my neck. My eyes, they flew back open, and I put my glasses on because I felt too vulnerable to be blind in that moment. I scanned the room in the dim light from the street lamp coming from the window, and I saw nothing. Yet the sounds of the footsteps continued, uninterrupted and more distinguishable than ever. They started near the door, made their way diagonally through the room to the small table where the boxy 1980s TV was set up, paused, moved from the TV to the doorless closet, paused again. To my building sense of dread, the steps then came forward to me, getting closer until I could feel the energy of someone standing directly next to the bed and gazing at me curiously. Then they moved on, walking over to a giant teddy bear propped against a wall in his very own chair, pause, before going back over to the TV and beginning to repeat the same round that they had just completed. In complete shock and amazement, I realized that I couldn't possibly be imagining this, as the steps made the same rotation throughout the room, at least 2 or 3 or more full times, always pausing at each location, including right next to me, which was my least favorite, and exuding an energy of curiosity. The footsteps sounded small and light, the stride short enough that it required 3 or 4 steps every time the being moved only a few feet in any direction. I was on edge at the oddness of this experience, but there was no negative energy coming from the being as it traipsed about the room. I suddenly realized that I simply knew it was a child, curious about the changes in the room and taking its time to check out all the new fixtures in the space, including me. I also knew that I couldn't stare at nothing all night. Following the path of the child I could hear but not see, so I finally took my glasses back off and tried to lay back down, thinking that if I ignored it and let it satisfy its curiosity, then the discomforting noises would eventually stop. Well, they didn't. With all the boundless energy and determination of a child, the creaks continued their repetitive journey around the room, so consistently that I could very soon predict where they would be next, how many steps it would take to get there, and how long they would pause to stare at whatever was in front of them before moving again to the next station. I was no longer scared, but neither could I relax. I felt foolish even as I fixed my mouth to speak, but I decided to address the entity out loud. I know things are suddenly very different in here and you're just trying to check everything out, but it's also the middle of the night and I can't sleep with you making all this noise in here. Could you please stop for the night so I can get some rest? Finally, all the heightened energy just left the room. My hairs laid back down and my neck stopped tingling, and I heard only silence. I got comfortable in the bed again, took a few more deep breaths to resettle my nervous system, and soon I fell asleep. The next morning, I was in the living room eating breakfast and telling Kat and Chris all about my experience the night before. My mum was going to arrive to pick me up soon, so I was finishing my story. I had stood up and made my way to the entrance of the hallway so that I could go back to the guest room and grab my overnight bag. I was facing them, telling them how I had finally gotten some peace and quiet, then pivoted to walk up the hall. Well, that had been the intention, but all I could do was turn before I was stopped in my tracks, unable to take a single step forward, because standing directly in front of me was a little girl. She looked solid and real though, and I would have thought a random neighborhood kid had found her way into the trailer, except she was all in grayscale. I would guess that she would have been about 6 or 7 years old, and wearing a dress with a little white square apron that belonged in the late 1910s or early 20s. Her hair was straight and jaw-length, and I could tell that she was a dark blonde with a small ribbon bow on one side of her head that I knew was pale blue, in spite of not actually seeing any color on her. She looked up at me with a sweet small smile on her face and a twinkle in her eye and then said, "I know you can see me, and I know you were just talking about my visit last night." She stood there in front of me for a good couple of seconds before turning to the side and leaning forward to follow a cat that I couldn't see, allegedly, trying to scoop up something at least, and she walked after it, directly through the wall. In shock, I slowly turned back around to face Kat and Chris again. They could both tell that something had transpired, and I know that I had a look on my face that was half grin and half stunned disbelief. "What just happened?" Chris asked excitedly. "You probably won't even believe me if I tell you," I gasped out. "We will. We know this house is weird. What was it?" she insisted. I then described the girl. "I knew it, Kat. Didn't I always say it felt like there was a little girl in here? I've been saying that for years," Chris screamed. Kat sort of chuckled and nodded, begrudgingly admitting that yes, Kat had said that many times before. By now, my mum would be showing up any minute, so I went to the back room, gathered up my pajamas and toothbrush, and quietly said a goodbye to this little girl. "You can come visit me again if you want, just not in the middle of the night next time, okay?" I said to the empty room, feeling a little stupid. And though I stayed many more nights in that home, I never did see or hear from that little girl ever again. I fell asleep on the couch pretty early last night, 10:30-ish. Usually, my significant other wakes me up and tells me to go to bed. However, we got into an argument earlier in the evening, and I think he was like, "I'm leaving her out there." Well, a bit after midnight, I heard 3 loud stomps, and this scared me half to death, so I woke up immediately. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw one of my dog's toys floating about 4 feet above the floor, a small lamb chop plushie with all of the stuffing ripped out. It was rotating a tiny bit and then was entirely still for a second. Then it started to slowly lower itself onto the floor. As soon as it was on the floor, I looked over at my dog, and we both ran to the bedroom. I got into bed. My significant other was awake, and I said, "There's something in the living room." He looked at me and pretty much brushed me off and told me to go to bed. It took me forever to calm down enough to fall asleep, and then I repeatedly woke up through the night. I kept thinking, or dreaming, about someone holding the dog toy, realizing that I was looking at them and then them slowly putting it down. In other words, I was really uneasy all night. I told my significant other about it in the morning before going to work, but he just said something along the lines of, "That's so weird," and then proceeded to take our dog outside to go potty. I didn't push the subject because I was so freaked out and also exhausted because I hardly slept. Fast forward to around 10:30ish this morning though, I texted my significant other and was like, "Did you get what I was saying about the creepy thing?" And he responded with, "Yes, the bed was shaking before you came in." I said, "You're lying," but he swore up and down that he was telling the truth. I also texted my siblings in our group chat, and they gave the usual, "Oh my goodness, so creepy" responses. But one of my sisters said, "3 loud stomps to mock the Holy Trinity," and I wasn't sure what she meant. I mean, I'm not religious at all, but I googled it, and I guess 3 loud stomps, knocks, or thumps represent demonic presences in Christianity. I got chills all over as I read that. This entire time, I've felt like the 3 loud stomps were from downstairs. I live above a bar, so that part of the experience didn't really scare me too much. I also was thinking that maybe I was just hallucinating, since I was only awake for half a second before I saw what I saw. It was the floating dog toy that scared the living heck out of me, and for a while, I felt like everything that I experienced was purposeful and maybe even evil. My significant other and I thought that maybe we had invited evil into the apartment because we had been watching and listening to nothing but horror stuff due to it being October. We also think that our argument maybe caused a lot of negative energy as well, that maybe allowed what was already present to manifest itself the way that it did. At this point though, I feel like maybe I was just hallucinating because I woke up so suddenly, and maybe the bed was shaking due to movement downstairs. I don't believe in ghosts, demons, the afterlife, but I feel like life would be more meaningful if I did. I'm a property manager and a 1-year postpartum, so I return to my company part-time. This is fun because I get to sort of float around to different apartment communities who need help and just help where needed. In September, I helped at a property about an hour from my house. It's a bit of a drive, but fairly small property, with relatively no big problems, so easy money for the day. I'm covering for a manager out on vacation, and of course it's the dreaded 6th of the month. This means that I'm handing out late letters and making calls, unfortunately. Definitely not my favorite part of the job, but it is necessary. The one thing that I hate about floating though is the residents don't know me well. So I'm delivering late letters and calling and they don't even know me. Again, not my favorite part of the job, but it has to be done. So, I had about 10 late letters to deliver that day. All was going normal and fine. Some people answer the door and say, "Yep, sorry, I'll have it paid on such and such date." Another person didn't answer, so I left info on the door, but they flipped me off as I was walking away. All pretty normal stuff, to be honest, that just comes with the job. But I get down to about the 7th or 8th person. I walk up to this apartment, and I can tell from the outside the occupants have absolutely destroyed this home. I smelled cigarettes, cat urine, and just a general mustiness before I even knocked. All the blinds were broken, blankets up on the window, all the works. I get up to the door, do my normal quick knock, waited about 5 seconds and was ready to post notice to the door. Right as I was folding it up to put it between the door partly swings open. A gentleman, wearing just boxers and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, opens the door but doesn't unlatch the security lock, so the door's not opened all the way. "What do you want?" he says as he's giving me a death glare, but also looking me up and down inappropriately at the same time. I explain that I was just here to deliver the late letters and that I would be on my way now. As I'm explaining this, I notice that he keeps looking over his shoulder, as if someone is standing next to him behind the door. I find this a bit odd, as if someone is hiding from me, especially because this gentleman won't open the door all the way. I hear some whispering, and now I'm sure that he's communicating with someone. The gentleman in the doorway asks me to wait and says that he has things in his apartment that he needs looked at. I explain that I was just here for the letter, but that he can send some photos into the office, and that I would get work orders in. He begins complaining about our maintenance team and states that he really wants someone to take a look in person. At this point, I'm feeling really uneasy. Typically speaking, I would enter and help no problem usually, but between the looks this guy was giving me and the creepy who knows who was behind the door, I'm just not feeling safe at this point. I defer again, trying to make myself sound unimportant and just say, "I'm just a floating person. I can't do anything without manager approval until she gets back, so really there's no point." At this point, someone catches my eye upstairs though. I see a window blind move. I notice 2 additional guys upstairs who are both staring down at me. I'm so uneasy now too that I could be sick. I tell the gentleman that I won't be entering without maintenance or the property manager present, due to it being an ongoing maintenance concern and there not being much that I can personally do anyway. He looks annoyed and finally just slams the door in my face. I get back to the office and grab the maintenance supervisor for the property to chat things over regarding this encounter. The maintenance supervisor explained to me that there used to be an old man who lived in that apartment, but then his son took over the lease after he died. He told me that he's noticed a lot of strange activity and individuals around that home since the dad died, but he hasn't personally witnessed anything illegal yet, so he's just let it go for now. He explained that they plan to make the move when the contract is over due to the condition of the home alone anyways, but while I cannot prove something horrible was going to happen, if I entered the premises that is, this is by far the creepiest encounter that I've had in property management in all my 7 years. This is an old story about my first paranormal experience that happened at least 17 years ago. This happened back when I was around 5 years old. I lived in a trailer with my parents on a hill in an isolated area in the middle of the woods, with the only family and friends of the family living within the mountainous area around us. One Saturday, I asked my parents if my cousin Sarah, 6 and female, could stay the night since she only lived a few minutes away. My parents agreed and picked Sarah up at around 8 p.m. Me and Sarah ended up staying pretty late talking while my parents fell asleep in the living room. My bedroom is in the middle of the trailer with 2 open doorways to the hallway, and since I had no doors, we could always see the light from the living room to mine. Well, as me and Sarah were talking, suddenly Sarah just stopped talking and turned her head towards the end of my bed. My bed was one of those bunk beds that had like storage cabinets on the bottom instead of another bed, so we were a bit elevated from the ground. But I noticed her face had a look of horror, so I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that there's something standing at the end of the bed. I turned to quickly look, and I saw a white-looking figure standing still at the end of the bed. I was quick to believe that it was probably just the clothes basket, and that stuff like that can look scary in the dark, and so that's what I told her. I thought that I knew that too because I've mistaken objects in the dark for other things before. I was just trying to rationalize the situation, I guess, so that Sarah wouldn't be afraid to come over again. And so I told her that I'll prove it to her, that it's just the basket at the end of the bed. Sarah begged me, though, to not do this, but I already started crawling to the end of my bed. I stared at what looked like a tall, white, blobbish figure, and looked back at Sarah and stuck my hand right through the figure. My heart instantly dropped when I swatted my hand around and felt nothing. No basket, no object at all. But strangely, it felt like I stuck my hand in the freezer. I quickly turned to look back at the figure with my hand still in it and saw it form what looked like a face. I scrambled back to Sarah as fast as I could in absolute horror. Me and Sarah were freaking out at the other end of the bed, staring at this thing. Seeing it in that moment, it almost looked like a white silhouette of a man with long hair. He just stood there, not moving in the slightest, though. Eventually, we came to the conclusion, though, that our only options were that if one of us can either turn the lights on or run to the living room to get my parents, that the figure might eventually go away. Me and Sarah argued who would be the one to do it, and eventually I caved in and just went for the light switch. I took one last glance at the figure before flipping the switch, and once the lights came on, it was gone. And so I flipped it back off just to be sure, and yep, it had disappeared for good, it seemed. Me and my cousin ended up staying up until morning that night, too scared to sleep. I've told my family about this and found out that our yard and most of the mountain area was actually native burial grounds. In fact, locals around the area nickname it Witches' Mountain since there has also been reports of witches living in the area back in the day. My family is very religious and don't like speaking much about the history, so I'm really sorry I cannot provide more information regarding that, as I was never really allowed to look into it. 17 years later, though, both me and Sarah, we still remember this experience like it was just yesterday. My wife and I have been living in our apartment for about 6 months now, and strange things started occurring about maybe a month ago. My dog is always staring at things around the house, growling at something that doesn't seem to be there. A few weeks ago, my wife was lying in bed and felt a motherly touch push her hair back, like a real human touch. She was completely alone in the room, mind you, with all windows and doors shut. There was no wind or anything either. Then recently, it happened again and she came out of the room feeling creeped out. But the most frightening thing just happened recently. In the middle of the night, while we were sleeping, our dog barked like crazy at the dark hallway and ran into it. We sprinted after him, checked the whole house, and we found nothing. We played it off as a bad dream of his, but then we all went back to sleep and I had a terrible nightmare. I woke up in a sleep paralysis episode with my dog staring at me. His mouth was moving and a man's voice was screaming at me to get out, over and over, getting faster and louder. My wife then had to wake me up as I was whimpering and couldn't move. I'm not a big believer in the paranormal, but this has become very terrifying for us. My wife and I are just looking for explanations at this point. She thinks that someone nearby in our apartment complex might be doing rituals or something. We found this white goo a couple of feet outside of our door that won't go away recently, like candle wax or something. Any help or explanation would be appreciated because we just want life to go back to normal. This happened around 2010 to 2012. My house was extremely old. Multiple people died in that home too. There were nice people that my neighbors knew of in there, and they had apparently died in there, like a World War II vet who was really nice to my friends before I lived on that street. He left some things behind like a bayonet attachment to his rifle, and I still have that to this day. My friend who saw the man alive around 2004 slept over my house around 2009 and said that he saw the ghost of that old man walking towards his battle blade in my room and faded away as he got it. But as more and more friends slept over, I had a lot of friends at that time, they all said the same thing. Something felt off about my house. It was just creepy and they sensed something at night. My dog, she would violently growl or bark at, well, nothing, and specifically growl or bark at my sister's room when it was empty. My sister and I one night heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs in her room, moving furniture in her room. We heard forks and spoons being tossed around in the kitchen. Keep in mind, this was before iPhones. My sister was in a separate room than me, and we came together the next morning to realize that we had both heard the same things going on in separate rooms, which we found insane. But then there was the experience. So one night, I was getting ready to go to sleep. I didn't have a door in my bedroom for many years, which I know sounds weird, but that's just how it went in my house. My dad at the time, he was severely depressed, drinking a lot and neglecting the house and basically the family too, which I believe ties to the negative energy in that house. But I was laying down closing my eyes as I wanted to fall asleep. The house was dead silent, and no joke, I felt a hard slap across my face, left cheek, so I automatically assumed it was my younger siblings playing a joke on me. I looked around my bed, my room, called their names, and I got nothing. The house was pitch black, and I went to lay back down and close my eyes, laying on my back this time. Didn't really think too much of it, and I wasn't scared really at all. But then 2 or so minutes go by, and another slap across the face, but this time the opposite side of my face, the right side. At this point, I feel annoyed, but also alarmed for sure. Something was off. I repeated the same search, and nobody was in my room or hiding on the stairs. My sister's room was across the hall upstairs. Her door was 4 feet away from my door, and if I laid on my side, I could see directly into her room if her door was open. At this point, I was really uncomfortable and sort of freaked out. I laid on my side with my eyes closed, and that was when I suddenly felt, well, what I can only describe as a presence, an energy that I had never felt before. Something told me to open my eyes, so I did, and I regret that to this day. What I saw was a tall black figure, out of this world and definitely not human. I could tell that it was not of our world because it seemed to be, well, not totally in our realm, if that makes sense, like it was phasing a bit. I couldn't tell if it was 3 feet away from me or 13 feet away, but I saw my sister's room open, and I could basically see as if it was hunched over my sister's bed in her room. It was absolutely terrifying. So I just sort of sat there, paralyzed, frozen, not knowing what to do. Eventually, though, I fell asleep staring at it. I woke up terrified, and I went to school feeling off that day. I walked home that day, and I waited 2 hours outside of my house until somebody else got home. I saw that figure a final second time one night. I was playing Xbox 360, the good old days, right, with my best friend, and we were talking online late at night, when suddenly his voice went out, and I just didn't hear anything from him. That's when I felt that tense feeling again, like I was being watched. This time I didn't have a door yet, but I had a sort of thin white blanket nailed to the door frame to act as some type of privacy door or blanket. But when I decided to look at my door, I saw it again. This black figure staring at me, only peeping its head in between the blanket and the door frame. At this point, it is physically touching real-life objects and altering them by having me see the blanket wrapping around its peeking head. It stared at me, and I decided to scream loud for my sister this time. I screamed her name, Jen, 3 times, until I heard her footsteps come stumbling to my room, and as she flung the makeshift blanket door in the air to enter, the entity just disappeared with the movement of the blanket. She seemed really confused and asked if I was okay. I told her what I thought I saw, and, well, I never saw that thing again after that. Other weird things about that house too is that my dog saw things that we couldn't see. My father was depressed and drinking, losing his mind. My mother tried to delete herself, but she survived, thank God. My brother became depressed, and he also had thoughts of the same thing in that house. My sister became addicted to drugs in that house, which didn't last long and went away quickly, thankfully. And then this happened to me. I truly believe that this house, it was cursed, because things have been so much better since we moved from there, and I'm really thankful for that. When I was 5 or 6 years old, 20 years back now, my mum and I moved into this small home in the country. No property size, but still no neighbours or anything. Like 5 minutes from a Walmart too. The first experience happened in my bedroom. My bed was against the farthest left wall corner next to a window, and the door was to the farthest right corner. My room was always clean as we simply didn't have enough stuff to make it cluttered. I remember waking up though and just sort of knowing something was there, in the corner near the door. How? Because I remember thinking to myself, just close your eyes and everything will be okay. But I couldn't. I turned and had seen this lump, a figure made from my clothing, as in it was taller than me or anything that I could have piled there. So in a shot in the dark, I beelined to my mum, who was in the room adjacent to me, and said that there was someone there. When she came and turned on the light, she told me to come inside. Clothes were absolutely everywhere, all over the floor, and just a chaotic mess flung around all over the room. She asked me if I did this, and I said no. Needless to say, I didn't sleep in my room that night. Now, the second is what actually traumatized me, as in the specific action prior to the encounter made me panic for 6 years afterward. Flushing the toilet, I would have this deep anxious feeling no matter where and would run out of the washroom afterward. The washroom had only one entry and the window was too small for a person to fit through. The toilet was right next to the door as well. But I did my business and flushed, and when I turned, there stood an old man. He was bearded, clean, and he just stood there looking at me. When I finally found my voice, I absolutely screamed. My mum and I described it like a blood-curdling scream, as if I had just cut off my finger or something. She came into me, closing my eyes, hands covered them, and saying that there was a man in there with me. It took her some time to console me, to open and talk further, but when I did, we didn't stay much longer in that house. It's probably important to state too that my mum was the one who verified my stories as an adult. Since then, I've spent years trying to either connect with whatever sense that I had, to see that person or dismiss what I had seen as something else, but I just can't. Between the long-term fear, anxiety, trauma from the event, to my mum's own account of the event secondhand, I can't find an actual explanation for whatever occurred that day. Throughout my childhood, I grew up in a pretty dark household, and I could recall several instances where, well, really no explanation could be derived. Here's a few. So the first one, we were watching a movie when a picture frame that had hung on the wall suddenly lifted and crashed to the floor. It had been there for years with no issues prior to this, so it was really strange. On another occasion, my older sister, 18 at the time, she was home from college, about to head to work. She talks to my mother from another room and tells her, "I love you, Mum, I'm going to work, bye." My mother replies, "I love you too, bye." And my sister begins driving down the street when she sees our mother driving past. My sister instantly hits the brakes. My mother recalls seeing a shocked expression and my sister's face ran pale. My sister says, "Weren't you at the house?" My mum was coming home from the store apparently though, and hadn't been home for at least 45 minutes. A third occasion, my little sister, 10, and I, 12, were home alone, too afraid to leave the family room due to having a weird creeped-out feeling. My father comes home from shopping and asks us why we moved the cat tower from his room to the hallway, blocking the door that he was trying to get into. But I can assure you that we never left that room. No one in our family touched it at all, and I still have no idea how it got there. Another time, my father, sister, and I are in my parents' room working on homework and work and all that, when we hear the front door handle being messed with and hear the door open. My mother and sister were on their way home from my sister's dance class, so we yelled hello. Our dogs run to the door to greet them. We hear sort of frantic, loud footsteps all throughout the home suddenly, and even outside around the house. They never responded to us. We hear the footsteps approaching the door and stops at the bedroom door. Getting worried, my dad yells for my mother, and realizing that something was wrong, my father grabs a Glock from his safe. He then searches all throughout the house. When he leaves the room, the footsteps stop. My sister and mother text our group chat, and they tell us that they were on their way home now. In other words, there was no one else in the home. No door opening and closing, signifying a person exiting or anything, but something definitely entered. Finally, on another occasion, seeing my sister walk past me in the kitchen as I prepared my lunch for the next day, I ask her if she wants me to make her some as well. She doesn't respond as she enters the family room, and so confused, I walk after her. But she wasn't in the family room. I then enter her bedroom down the hall. I ask her why she ignored me just then, and she tells me that she hasn't left her room for over 20 minutes as she's doing homework. I instantly felt the blood draining from my face when she said that. Our home did have a dark history. I found a calendar shoved in the floorboards once from the 1930s, which mysteriously disappeared. Our home was apparently a meth lab in the early 2000s. The couple who lived there died in a police chase. Even our grandmother said that we would claim that there was a man watching us in our home bedroom, which she said creeped her out due to the fact that a man had died in her bedroom before they moved in. Unfortunately, she ended up passing away in that very spot too. I never really believed in ghosts, supernatural, or what have you. There were several things that happened where I questioned it, I suppose, but I would just explain it away in my head, even if the explanation isn't even that good. For instance, me and my wife were in bed and we felt a thump on the bed. I turn on the light and there's nothing in the room. At that time we had 2 cats and they were really fat. The thump was very similar to when he tries to jump on the bed, but I checked and they were in the other room, and our bedroom door was closed. I chalked that up to someone hitting the floor really hard one way or another, and we lived in an apartment at that time, and the impact was felt on the bed. So I accepted that and just carried on, even though the question definitely stayed at the back of my mind. But all in all, I've never really seen anything physically, so I just wasn't a believer. That is, until around a few months ago, when me and my wife were watching TV. It was the middle of the afternoon and we heard a thump on our sliding door to the backyard. It sounded a lot like a snowball hitting it. There was snow on the ground at this time, so I go to investigate, thinking that maybe it was my daughter in the backyard throwing snowballs at the door or something. It sounded like something soft hitting it, which is why I thought it was a snowball. I walk up to the glass door and I see nothing out there until something small and metallic hits the glass right in front of my face. I watch it bounce off the glass and land right by my foot and on the rug that I'm standing on. I pick it up and it's a little screw for a Ring doorbell camera. I replaced our old one the day before, and that was one of the extra screws that came with it, and I had put the screw in the box that it came in and put the box in the drawer, which is the direction the screw was thrown from. My wife heard it hit the glass as well and asked, "What was that?" as she was watching me investigate the first sound. when I told her, we were both freaked out. I mean, there was no way anyone threw that. There was nothing but a dead-end kitchen where it came from, and we were the only ones home on top of that. This was the first time that I'd actually seen something, and I couldn't explain it away. Even a bad explanation just wouldn't fit. Anyway, days later and I'm waking up for work. It's dark in my bedroom, I'm the only one in there. I have light switches by my head on the wall, but I decided to get up and walk to the end of the room to turn on another light switch that lights up my whole room and not just the headboard. As I'm walking, I remember the incident with the screw being thrown, and I say to myself, what if whatever that was that threw the screw made its presence known right now and scares the heck out of me? And instantly, after that thought was made, I heard a very loud crashing sound coming from the hallway area outside of my door. I get startled and flip on the lights and open the door. My wife was downstairs and comes to the bottom of the stairs asking what was that. I said, I don't know, and go to the laundry room, and I see a picture has fallen off the wall and onto a garbage can, knocking the garbage can over, which is what was the sound. Now, either that was a very crazy coincidence, or perhaps whatever it is actually answered me. I told my wife, and she got mad at me, saying that now she's stuck at home with the kids after I summon the spirit and leave for work. Fast forward a few months, and I come home from work and I'm the only one home. It's still daylight outside, and I take the garbage out. As I'm walking back to the front door, I feel a little rock hit me in the back of my arm. I turn around and see nothing. I look up and around and see absolutely nothing or no one around. But the craziest thing is that this was caught on my Ring doorbell camera. I've watched it many times, and I can assure you that there was no one anywhere. I could not see the rock on the camera, obviously, because it was too small, but it had to have been thrown from directly behind me, judging from where it had hit me. It was not thrown hard either, but just hard enough that I could feel it. I never could find the rock, but I imagine that it was pretty small because I never picked it up on the camera. Although, I should probably entertain the possibility that it wasn't a rock at all. So before I get started, I just want to let you guys know that I'm going to briefly describe different scenarios that have happened between my sister and me. I also do want your honest opinion on what you think this thing is or these things are, and if you could let me know, I would be very grateful. So, I'm just going to start with something terrifying that has happened to me first. It was around nighttime, and I was rinsing something out in my laundry room sink. To the right of me was the back door of our house, and then there was the entrance to the kitchen. My mum had asked me to help her clean around the house that day, so I did. She is my mum after all, and I can't really say no. But I was about to start vacuuming when my mum told me that the vacuum needed to be cleaned out. So as I was emptying it, I noticed a sponge that was part of the vacuum that was very dirty, so I walked over to the laundry room sink to get it nice and clean. I started washing the sponge and drenching it in soap, just minding my own business. As I began washing that nasty sponge, I saw my mum walk past the kitchen doorway. She caught my eye from my peripheral vision, and I wanted to call her over so that she could see how much dirt was coming out of the sponge. And as I shout "Mama," I wait a second expecting her to answer me, but instead, I noticed her walk right past and not even turn her head. I look in her direction, and what I saw, though, was definitely not my mum. The figure that I saw was completely black. The weird thing, though, is that it was built just like my mother, though. She was pregnant at the time, so I noticed that the figure had a belly, and my mum always had her hair in a ponytail just like the figure. The figure had perfect posture, and as it walked past, it wasn't bobbing up and down like it should have been. It looked more like it floated past. I know, very strange description, but that's the best way that I can describe it. After I realized what happened, though, I shouted louder for my mum and she wasn't responding. I left the laundry room to find out that she was sitting outside on the front porch the whole time. She was never even in the house when this happened. I knew then, though, that whatever that was, it was trying to mimic my mum for some reason. Does anybody know if this could have been some type of demon, though? Because honestly, I have no idea. Now I'm going to tell you a story about my sister, Ariana. So one day, she was sitting in her room watching something on her iPad. She had her knees up so that she could place her iPad on her lap as she was watching it. As she was minding her own business, she noticed a figure standing right by the entrance of her room. She described it as being very, very tall, extremely thin, with pale white skin. Its cheeks were sunken in and it had bright white eyes. The lips, they also looked extremely red and were abnormally wide, smiling at her. It was very still as it watched her, and she immediately looked up at it. She put her knees down. She got extremely scared, obviously, and closed her eyes trying to convince herself that there was nothing there, that she was just seeing things. But as she opened them back up, that thing that was there, it hadn't left. She threw her iPad on her bed and bolted to her bedroom door, but as she was passing that thing, she said that it moved beside her in a way that, whenever she passed it, it made her bump into its body. She was struggling to get her door unlocked as she noticed its head was fully turned towards her, its body still facing the bed. She immediately ran to my room, swung the door open and just stood there looking at me. I knew that something was off instantly because she just had this look on her face. She looked like she had just watched somebody get murdered, and her face was completely pale, her eyes were bloodshot. I immediately asked Ariana, "What happened? Are you okay?" And as those words left my mouth, she just started sobbing, struggling to get any words out. She literally started hyperventilating, in fact, in fear of what she had just seen. I came up to her, calming her down, sat her down on the bed, and she told me what had just happened. Chills instantly ran down my spine, too. I had goosebumps everywhere. Genuinely, too, I was terrified for her. This made me angry in a way, too, because whatever it was trying to scare her. But my question is, for what? Does this thing seriously not have anything better to do? At this time, my sister was 12 years old, and she continued seeing disgusting things all around the house, too. It's a bit like these things that she sees are trying to get something out of her, maybe. Maybe her being scared gives them power over her or something. I genuinely don't know what it could be, but I pray to God every night about letting my sister and I have full authority and power over these entities that we see. Also, only me and my sister have seen things in our house, nobody else. There was even a time when I had a friend over and she saw something at the same time that I did, but I saw the full-on figure as she only saw the shadow. Honestly, too, I would think that I was going crazy if it wasn't for the fact that others had seen something too. I've heard things about mediums and how they can feel or see and sort of sense spirits or demons or whatever, and I was wondering if I may have something similar to that. Like, sometimes I'll be sitting in my room and I feel the presence around me change, or when I walk into a room I can tell something is off. I've seen things in other people's houses as well, and I have so many more stories that I could share too, and if anybody wants to hear them, then please do let me know, as it would maybe be therapeutic to share them now. But the fact that my mum, dad, and my older sister have never seen or experienced something in my home, except for Ariana and I, is weird, right? Please let me know what you guys think about everything, and thanks for listening. I, a 28-year-old female, live in a small, seemingly safe, but not so aesthetically nice subdivision. My partner, 30 and male, works in law enforcement, so I am home alone many nights throughout the week. Now, a few months ago, we adopted a small dog, and since I work remotely, I frequently take our dog on walks throughout the neighborhood for exercise and to help with potty training. We've lived in the neighborhood several years, but normally we don't walk the neighborhood much, so we don't really know many of our neighbors. Now that I go outside more, I'm beginning to meet more of our neighbors, which is nice. Usually it's a simple like hello in passing, but there are a few neighbors I now speak to pretty frequently. Everyone seems harmless and friendly. Well, except for this one neighbor who I'll refer to as Bob. He's approximately 50 and male. One day, I was walking my dog, and as I passed Bob doing yard work, he stopped me and said what a cute dog I had. He went on to tell me about his time in the military, training bite dogs, how he was shot and had remnants even behind his heart, etc. And while odd, it seemed friendly enough, I suppose. What I thought was going to be a 5-minute conversation, though, turned into 90 minutes of me smiling, politely nodding, and slowly backing away. I'm going to try my best to retell the conversation from memory, but it's hard because Bob was all over the place, and his stories were not cohesive at all. While specific, they were very over the top and embellished as well. Because of this, I won't give too many details for identity reasons. But essentially, he went on to talk about how rich and important he is, along with his family, yet he lives in a mobile home. He said that he's so important that he's had every presidential cabinet on speed dial, that the government has flown him around the world on Apaches to do top-secret missions, that his family had gotten away with murder and it's been swept under the rug by the government, that even Googling his name would have the authorities sent to your door for questioning. He said that he used to be in construction and did masonry work for a bunch of celebrities and still hangs out with a lot of them. He said that he speaks 7 languages, has a black belt in martial arts, and wrestles alligators. He asked me to feel his arm muscle and lifted up his shirt to show me his scars. I could literally go on and on about all the crazy and incoherent things that he said. At this point, I chalked it up to the ramblings of someone not mentally okay. It took a turn though when he asked, "Your old man is the cop that lives down the street, right?" I wish that I wouldn't have made the mistake of saying yes. As a woman, it can be hard to set boundaries with people like this for fear of confrontation or things escalating. But Bob proceeds to tell me how his son, who turns out went to high school with my partner and my partner, really don't get along. He said that he thinks that it has something to do with my partner and his son's baby mama, as Bob puts it. For context though, my partner and I are high school sweethearts, and we never really spoke to Bob's son as he was in a different grade than us, and we certainly haven't spoken to him since graduating. Neither of us know the mother of the child, but Bob also started making comments on my hair. It's red, which is often fetishized, but he asked me to take my sunglasses off so that he could see my eyes. He then said that I reminded him of an old neighbor that he used to have, and he also said that I reminded him of his daughter. He kept saying that you're a pretty girl and that I reminded him of his daughter. He then proceeds to tell me about all the hot women that he's slept with, and how he's been to court for over 50 paternity tests, and wants to know if he might be my dad. I'm not originally from this area, and my parents have been together 33 years. No way Bob is my dad at all. I'm sure that I'm leaving a bunch of stuff out, but you get the gist, right? I finally was able to make a break for it, finished my walk, and I instantly headed home. This was about 3 weeks ago, and I no longer go for walks with my dog. I take him to a park or a friend's house instead. But since then, Bob has come to my house and knocked on my door 3 times, the last time being today. I obviously did not answer the door all 3 times. The past 2 times my partner was not home, and today my partner was sleeping. He's a night shift worker. And quite honestly, I'm a little bit freaked out and not sure what to do. My plan was to keep ignoring him, but I'm afraid that it's going to escalate or I'll run into him outside since I still haven't taken my dog out to go to the bathroom. My mum wants my partner to go talk to Bob to see what his problem is or what he wants. Personally though, I think that that's a bit of a bad idea. But what makes this really creepy is that I looked him up on the county's clerk of court's website, and he has a very long rap sheet dating all the way back to the 80s to the present day. It started off with traffic infractions, careless driving, running stop signs, etc., but quickly escalated to possession and dealing of meth and cocaine, several charges in fact, charges of soliciting prostitution, 2 charges of kidnapping, and tons of battery charges, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft of firearms, burglary with a firearm, domestic violence, violation of a protection order, and that's all I saw before I genuinely just had to stop. I even thought maybe I was looking at the wrong person, but I confirmed the full name and date of birth, so it's definitely him. I'm going to do some more digging, but please do let me know what you guys think. Do you think that I should do something about this? Do you think that we should confront him? He's obviously mentally unstable, but do I really have something to worry about? Or should I just let this go and get on with my life? This happened in 2005 when I was 4 years old. So my dad was working far away and there was only my mum and me. She said that she was going to buy some food and to open the door to nobody. So I kept watching the TV. I was sitting on the ground and I had the door at my back. We had no actual door there. It was like the shape of the place where a door was supposed to be, but just without one. A door frame, in other words. While watching the TV, I heard my mum close the front door, then get on her bike, turn it on, and I remember listening to the sound of her bike going away, being harder to hear it as time went on until I couldn't hear it anymore. After what I guess was a few minutes, I'd be lying if I said how much time I knew actually passed, I started feeling this coldness. This has been a reoccurring experience through my life as well, which starts in my arms and feet, and for some reason it sort of made me look at my back. And when I did, there she was. This grown woman with exactly my mum's face looking at me, with no expression other than an exaggerated smile while staring at me with those black eyes. She only moved her head a bit while looking at me, and for some reason she kept outside of the room, like the place where the door is supposed to be was stopping her from coming in. I said to her, "Mummy," but there was no reaction. "Hello?" I got nothing from her, just that strange stare and that smile. As she didn't answer, I looked away from her and I just went back to watching TV. Yes, I gave my back to whatever that thing was. And after a few minutes, I would guess, I looked back again, but she was gone. That's when I began hearing my mother's bike again as she was coming back. And then I heard the front door opening and I rushed to her and said, "Mummy, why didn't you say hi before?" She had no idea what I was talking about, obviously, but I can tell you that whatever that thing was, it was definitely not her. I don't remember if that thing had the same clothes as my mum or not, but when my mum came back, the cold disappeared. It is one of the most vivid memories I have from childhood, and I'm wondering, what was that thing? And also, why didn't it ever come in? I was baptized and I would go to church on Sunday. I would pray to God before going to sleep every night that my whole family would be protected. So did that protect me from whatever that was? I really don't know. It's an absolute guess, but genuinely, it's the best thing that I've been able to come up with. So I don't particularly believe in the paranormal. I've had a small number of experiences, of course, that could possibly fall into the category of paranormal, or maybe just a vivid imagination. But this experience in particular happened a little over 5 years ago, and I think it will stick with me for the rest of my life. My ex and I were probably some of the most hard-headed people that you could meet, and this hard-headedness led to us deciding that we should construct our own house with very little help from subcontractors. The property we decided on had a unique history. It was owned in the early 1900s by quite a famous circus owner. On the property once sat a hotel, a water tower, and a fountain. Only a fountain and basement of the hotel remained. The property was divided into 4 pieces, and we purchased a piece that only had pillars and a concrete walk hidden in the woods. It was flat, high and dry, and most importantly, cheap. It was everything we were looking for. Now, during the construction of our home, we bought a small camper to live in on the property because who wants to pay rent, right? Definitely not us. We had constructed the house, hired a plumber to do the plumbing, and decided to take it upon ourselves to dig for the underground power without aid of the power company. Instead, we dragged along our younger brothers with pizza, beer, and a little bit of pay. We were all working far into the night as the trencher that we rented, it didn't quite go deep enough, so we resorted to hand digging the last few inches along the 200 feet to the power pole. Since the plumbing worked in the house, we tried our best to use the toilet inside to minimize the amount of waste in our camper tank. We were definitely not fans of cleaning that thing out. I had to pee really bad, so I left the group of guys huddled over the trench digging and ran into the dark house. I didn't bring a phone or a flashlight, just my body. I left the front door open to allow for light to come through from the lights that we had illuminating our work area. I sat down and did my thing, only for the front door, to slowly close. I sort of froze on the toilet as I was completely shrouded in darkness. "I'm in here peeing," I called out, thinking that it was one of the guys. There was no response. All I could hear were footsteps coming toward the bathroom. "It isn't funny," I yelled, thinking surely it must be my ex pulling a prank on me. The footsteps, though, they grew closer and stopped right in front of the open bathroom door. "Stop, please. I don't like it. It's not funny," I pleaded, feeling my heartbeat hard against my chest. "D, stop, for real." And it was then that I could hear what sounded like a soft chuckle from outside the door. Furious and scared, I threw the toilet paper roll. It hit nothing but the floor. "D, please, just stop. You're really scaring me." Nothing. Not a single response. I hurriedly pulled up my pants and stood near the toilet, fear gripping my chest. There was no way that I was walking out of that bathroom at that point. No way. So I didn't. We had a small bathroom window, a bit off the ground, and I climbed out of it as fast as I could. I scraped my arm on the brick getting through, but I didn't care a bit. I ran around the dark side of the house to where the boys worked in the light, and I saw them all there intently working on the trench. "That wasn't funny, D," I said, tears still stinging my eyes and my chest aching. "Well, what wasn't?" he asked, looking up from where he was kneeled over digging. And I could tell in that moment, when they all looked at me, that he was telling the truth and that they were oblivious. So, who closed the door so quiet and methodically like that? Whose footsteps did I hear? Was the soft chuckle my imagination? Following that incident, we completed the house and finally moved in. Our front door would lock us out unexpectedly and for seemingly no reason, despite us changing the lock multiple times. We ended up keeping a spare key outside after being locked out one night with no phones or keys. I awoke from my sleep to find a dark figure standing at the edge of our bed one night. We heard someone whistling a soft tune when we had a bonfire in the middle of the night, and the combination of all of it makes me now lean towards something being there on that property. But the skeptic in me still really loves to deny it. So I was at my grandma's house one time. I was around 4 years old at this point. It was right after Halloween, and I say this because I remember the tiger costume that I wore that year. But anyway, I'm sitting on my grandma's lap, just eating some candy and watching TV with her, when I happen to turn my head back and see someone moving from one of the bedrooms to the bathroom across the hallway. It happened fast, and the figure was all black, but not like a shadow. It was a solid cloaked-looking figure. At first, I really didn't know what to think. I just kept watching. I thought maybe it was my cousin, Easy, playing a prank on me because he liked to scare me a lot back then. But Easy wasn't there that weekend. He was supposed to be at a friend's house, and it was just me and my grandma until my grandpa got off work later. So I sat there watching, and after a little bit of time went by, I remember seeing the figure sort of poke its head out from the bathroom and wave at me. There was no face to it, though. It was like it was wearing a black veil and a hood over its head. It disappeared back into the bathroom before doing it again, popping out and waving at me. This time, I alerted my grandma and told her that there was someone in the bathroom. I was scared because I didn't know or understand who this could have been, but I know what I saw. My grandma gets up and walks down the hall to the bathroom. Mind you, no one ever exited the bathroom, or I didn't see anything. And of course, after looking, there was no one there. I even followed her and looked myself, but there was no one. So we checked all 3 other bathrooms after that, and there was no one in the house but us. I don't know what that was. I don't know where it came from, but this is something that has always stuck with me. Years later, as an adult, I've had 2 dreams about the hooded shape or being or whatever it was, but that's it. I've never encountered anything else like this before, and I say this as someone who's had a fair share of ghost run-in encounters. I honestly wish that there was a bit more to this, but really, that's all there is. I would really like your opinions on this situation and what you think could be done. So, to begin, no one lives there now. We just come there from time to time. This house was built in the 1800s, and since it's been renovated, it's still in place like it was originally built, but it looks a bit different. It's from my husband and his brother, and they got it from their grandmother. Grandmother and her husband got it from an old lady that lived there. They made a deal with her to take care of her, and in return they would inherit a house. Everyone in the village always said that that lady was apparently a witch. The lady passed away and they got the house, and after Granddad died, Grandma lived there alone. Grandpa died in his 60s and Grandma died when she was 99 years old. She always said, though, that there must be something in the house that's not from this world. She would always hear weird noises. She invited priests for blessings and hoped that it would cleanse the house, but nothing ever really seemed to help. Now, my husband and his brother, they have some crazy stories from that house. When they went to sleep, they heard steps, and Alexa would go off many times with loud music. Their rooms have one wall that they share, and my husband saw black shadows in the hallway often. His dog one time jumped from the bed, started barking at the door, and was in a lot of distress. She was shaking with fear, and then the door of the closet opened, and she just wouldn't come out of there. His brother, whenever he was there alone, when he goes to sleep, feels like something is always choking him. There were a lot of weird things like that. One time when they renovated, they decided to move some bricks that were in the garden for some 40 years or so ago, and they found bones beneath them. The dog took one of them and chewed on it until my husband could take it away from her, and she died 3 months after that from intestinal perforation. Coincidence, maybe? I don't know, but it's a bit weird. There's a lot of other things, but I think you get the picture, and I'm wondering what we could do about this. Is the house cursed or haunted, or I don't know, is there something in there? Demonic? And if there is, well, what can we do about it? This happened to me back in 2008 to early 2010s. When I was 11, I met a girl who was the same age as me, 6th grade. She and I weren't in the same class until high school, but we were in the same school, so we saw each other often. By the middle of the 6th grade, things got a little bit creepy. Somehow, she was everywhere every time I had an extra class, including every time that I had to switch from another schedule to another one. My entire life, I never gave her my private information, but somehow she just knew. Unfortunately, I had reported it to the teacher or faculty members, but they brushed it off by warning as a ruse, because I didn't have enough evidence to prove that it was actually her. What's worse, we weren't allowed to give any electronic device sort of information, like phones for example, for pieces of evidence against her, except calculators for maths and physics or whatever. Weird, right? Anyway, this bothered me for a long time. She even shared the same home economics class and swimming lessons as mine during the 8th grade, but yet again not the same group. Even in 9th grade, she still kept following me non-stop, despite me warning her to leave me alone. After I graduated, I left for high school to start over, and even though I forgot about her until the middle of October of 2012, she was back again. My skin honestly turned pale and my heart began to race when I saw her. I was in a panic. I mean, this girl, how did she even know that I was in the high school that I was in? I mean, again, I didn't leak my information anywhere, and certainly not to her. Once again, she wouldn't leave me alone though, and this is where things start to get a bit worse. You see, she guilt-tripped me into befriending her to let her use my belongings without my permission, and despite her softer manner, it was definitely a red flag to begin with that I should have avoided sooner. Another time, she overheard me and my classmate having a conversation about my wanting a key charm that my classmate had. The next day, she attacked me after I took a seat in the class because she knew that I wanted something that she didn't. Again, really strange behavior, but this incident caught the attention of the principal this time in my high school, and the principal recapped the whole situation by writing a statement report. I ended up having to rewrite the whole thing twice because of grammar errors and all that, and by the third, the principal had made a decision. She was suspended for a week, but that didn't do much. She returned after a week and accused me of her suspending, which honestly I wasn't even involved with in her drama and all that. I mean, I didn't have any other choice but to report my statement. Once again too, she guilt-tripped me for other reasons by hypocritically calling me for being a terrible friend, and she even went as far as to destroy some of my belongings and supplies. I called her out on that, but she pretended that she didn't remember it. Worse too, she framed a student for having a torn notebook that she destroyed, and yet she refused to admit her mistakes. That was my last straw, as it honestly made my blood boil a bit. But I didn't want to show my anger as she gave me a watch in exchange for money, which turns out she swindled it and got away with it. But in all of these situations, half of my peers and teachers witnessed these incidents and warned me that I should end my friendship with her, that she wasn't my friend, just saw me as a pawn and manipulated me by taking advantage of my kindness and trust. We were still in the same high school, mind you, but I sort of quietly, outright, not to be close with her again, started distancing myself. That is, until early December of 2012, because that was the last time that I saw her, and I guess that she was expelled after the last warning from one of my peers. I felt relieved, but I'll never forget what she did to not only me, but to the other half of my peers as well. It took me nearly to the end of high school to really realize that she was indeed not a very good friend, and her attitude was sort of sociopathic and very creepy as well. That was, in the end, the reason why I ended things with her for good as well. Luckily, I didn't give her my phone number or address or anything, since that wasn't allowed in the school and we had moved by this point. I managed to avoid that red flag, I guess, which I am very grateful for. It's been some time since this incident took place. After I finished my high schooling in 2015, I'm almost 27 and currently have a job, and this experience has definitely made it difficult to trust someone or befriend them again. It was a weird time for me, and last I heard, she was in trouble with the law, and yeah, again, definitely a red flag that I managed to dodge. lot of weird things have been happening around my place, but almost every incident is possibly explained by something normal, I guess. Like my bedroom door closing gently on its own, but my window was open, so it could have been that, I suppose, even though there was no wind blowing that night. But every situation is sort of like this. Like, for instance, I hear floorboards squeaking on my stairs when no one is upstairs or anywhere near there. But it is an old house and noises happen, right? I often hear or feel someone walking into the room while my back is turned. I look back fully expecting to see my son or my husband trying to sneak up on me and startle me, but there's no one there. I also have had the sensation of someone gently grabbing me when nobody is around. That's been happening since I was a kid. I'm currently in my late 30s. But there's some things that have also completely freaked me out. I was standing in the hallway talking to my son one day, and I noticed this shadow on the wall above the doorway next to us. I assumed it was caused from the sunlight coming in through the bathroom window behind him. The shadow was moving like my son was while talking to me. But then he walked away and, unbelievably, the shadow stayed there. At first I thought it was actually just my shadow, but I moved and the shadow stayed. It was still moving about like it was when my son was there, speaking to me. I tried putting my hands up in front of the window, to block the sunlight, but I couldn't get my actual shadow to reach that high up on the wall, no matter where I stood. The window is unusually high up on the wall. You definitely need a ladder to see into the bathroom from the outside. I actually recorded a video of the shadow to show my husband at the time too. I could have sworn that I saved it to my Google Photos, but it's not there at the moment, so I have to look around for it. But the incident that freaked me out the most was when I was opening the bathroom door to exit the bathroom. The door suddenly swung open so hard that I honestly thought that my son was messing with me, and that he grabbed the door from the outside and yanked it from my hand, swinging it wide open. I looked immediately through the small opening on the hinged side of the door to catch him in the act of trying to scare me, yelling, "Nice try." But when I did, and when I went out there and looked around, nobody was there. So, am I just being paranoid, or is there something going on here? So, I really don't know what's going on, and I don't know who to talk to, and I'm not necessarily rolling in dough to hire a psych or a doctor or something. I guess I just want some advice. I don't know if I'm going crazy. I want to know if anything like this has happened to anyone else, because I just don't want to feel alone anymore. So here's what happened. I was sleeping, and I think I got sort of stuck in between sleeping and awake. I genuinely thought that I was awake, and I tried to get up, but all of a sudden I just couldn't move. Now, I've had sleep paralysis before, but this time was completely different. I was 100% conscious and lucid, and at first I wasn't really scared, I guess. I just sort of laid there. I remember just thinking, how long is this going to be like this for? And so after a few minutes, I tried to get up again, and I realized that I can actually move my arms, all of my body parts, but sort of not at the same time. Imagine like a phantom sort of limb syndrome, but the difference here is that I don't have any missing limbs. This is going to sound weird, I know, but I could have sworn that I could move everything, but my real body wasn't moving at all. And the strangest thing out of all of this experience is that I could see my hands when I moved them, while my real arms and hands remained sort of motionless next to my body. So I'm literally waving my arms around, and I could see them, but they were sort of transparent. And so at this point I begin to panic, thinking that I'm actually dead or something. My knees were up in the air, and my feet were on the bed with the rest of my body, with the blanket on me from the waist down. I had my iPad with a case that had a stand on it placed on my stomach when I originally fell asleep. I grabbed my iPad and put it next to me. I felt the case close together in the back of it, and heard it close even, and saw it, but it sort of felt lighter and was like I took the soul out of my iPad because it was also transparent when I grabbed it. I did that 2 more times and my real iPad remained on my stomach. Only when I moved my hands and arms I could see them, and when I stopped they were sort of invisible completely. Anyway, so I'm laying there for like 10 minutes, and I started to get bored, I guess, and wanted to move my hands around again and watch what was happening. I started to touch my face, and it felt sort of squishy and just weird. The next thing I did was I interlocked my fingers like in a cartoon where someone would sort of crackle their fingers. And the second that I did that, something big crawled from my right shoulder onto my body and bit onto my hand. Weirdly though, it didn't hurt, like bad, but I felt it. It felt like needle teeth, like a cat maybe, and it stayed on me, biting into me. When it ran across my body is when I could see it, and whatever it was humanoid but moved like a primate. It had long, very skinny arms, and ran like a monkey, like with its knees next to its shoulders. This was a matter of seconds, mind you, so when it bit down it felt like maybe 19 seconds or so, which is long because I couldn't move my head and I could only move my arms, and they were only my spirit arms or whatever. Again, I want to remind everyone that this wasn't a dream. I was 100% conscious and lucid. I couldn't move my physical body, obviously, but I was thinking and looking around for like 15 to 20 minutes before this happened. For some reason, I have no idea why I did this, but I reached with my other hand and I grabbed the back of, well, whatever this thing is, its head, and it felt like short hair, like a pit bull almost, like the scruff of the back of a dog's neck or head. And I saw it look at me at this point, and it had dark holes where its eyes should have been. I don't know if there were eyes there or not, because it was only for a split second that I saw it, because I think out of shock I just let go, and I watched it run behind my legs, and then it peeked around my legs and looked at me. Then when it stopped moving, it disappeared because when it moved I could see it, like my arms. After that though, I must have broken out of whatever this was because all of a sudden I could move again and everything felt normal. Weirdly though, I could still feel the bite on my hand for like 15 minutes, the sort of pain and pressure of it. Honestly, I just sat there and I was like, what the heck just happened? I still have no idea what any of that was. It's never happened to me again, and it's never happened to me before that either. It was completely random and out of the blue, and I don't know if I'm going crazy, like I said, if I need to see a psych or a doctor or something, but whatever it was, it happened, and it's really freaking me out. My mother and I are very much into the paranormal, and have been for a very long time. Before my son was born, in fact, the two of us would go on paranormal investigations together, alongside of some professionals. We also enjoyed watching all of the paranormal programs on television, including the reenactments, documentaries, and investigation programs or shows. Anyway, one night, just like most evenings, my mother and I were sat on the couch watching Paranormal Hotel. While we were watching this, there was a comment made by one of the paranormal experts that they comment on stories, and they explained why you should never mess around with Ouija boards, demons, or something along those lines. I turned to my mum with that and said, I wouldn't mess with them, would you? And jokingly and pretty foolishly, she looked at me and said, oh yeah, I would. I knew that she was joking, but I quickly warned her not to joke like that, as it could be seen as taunting by any spirits or entities, despite us never experiencing anything in our home, or having any reason to think our home could be haunted. With all that I knew and had researched, I just wanted to be cautious, I guess. I then proceeded to tell her how spirits or entities can use electricity to come through to our realm. My mum looked at me and she shook her head, saying that she didn't believe that was possible, but I told her again not to speak like that. Now, here is where things get a little bit scary. Not even 1 minute later, as we sat there watching the TV, my upper left arm began to burn, and it was like nothing that I'd ever felt before. I knew in that moment that this was not normal, and so with that I looked at my mum and told her that my arm was burning, and that I thought that I'd been scratched. I pulled up the sleeve to my t-shirt, and lo and behold, a large red scratch was appearing against my skin, becoming darker as we watched it. However, this scratch was in the shape of a large Z, like a perfect Z. Myself and my mother were pretty frightened by this. My partner was in the home at the time, and I instantly went into the room that he was in and showed him my arm, and he was also in a little bit of shock by that. As well as being really frightened, to the point that I was shaking, I was also angry that something had entered our home and caused me harm like this, especially when I wasn't the one who made the joke. I called out to who or whatever was with us, telling it that it was not welcome in our home, that it had no right to harm me, and that it had to leave, but my mum also apologizing for her joke. And then we turned the television off. After this incident, I have never been harmed by anything unseen again. It was honestly a really weird and terrifying thing that I've experienced. I have no idea how it got into our home, or if it still lingers, or if it took my words and left. I also want to stress that the Z that appeared on my skin, it came out of absolutely nowhere. Like, there is no logical explanation as to how this happened. I was just sitting there, and one moment it wasn't there, and the next it was there. Mind you too, it was pretty deep, and like I said, it was in the shape of a perfect Z. In other words, there's just no way that I or anyone else in the home caused this. I did want to know though if anyone else here has experienced anything similar. Does anyone have any idea of what or who may have scratched me? Does the Z that was scratched onto my skin have any significance? Like I said, there was no way that I could have scratched myself. I was sat with my hands down by my sides watching TV. Nobody was near me, and the shoulder that received the scratch was on the side of the couch by the wall. So, it is honestly just completely unexplainable. That is, if you discount the paranormal. I'm 29 years old and a quadriplegic, wheelchair-bound, due to an accident when I was 14, leaving me paralyzed with no feeling or movement below my nipples. After years of consideration, to make my life easier and more stress-free, I decided to get a colostomy. It made the most sense for me to do it, to make ease of life. For this surgery, I would need to do a 48-hour fast before my colonoscopy, and then the next day, I would have my colostomy and could still not have any food up until the surgery, which means that I roughly went 4 days without eating. Now, besides my surgery getting pushed back 3 hours, the surgery itself went well, and I awoke and was conscious, and everything went as planned. I would need to be hospitalized that evening, and the next day as well, and possibly a third, depending on how the nurses felt. That night, as my day winded down and my visitors would leave, I would spend the evening watching TV on my phone until I just got tired enough to try and fall asleep. I cannot feel that part of my body, so I wasn't in any pain or anything, but they were giving me small doses of pain medicine, just to keep me comfortable and help me to get some sleep. My room was dark with just the lights from my IV machine and the crack of the blinds from my window illuminating the room from the parking lot streetlights from the hospital. I would have some trouble sleeping that night, mostly feeling like I would sleep 5 or 10 minutes and then suddenly just awaken, but then would quickly fall back asleep just for the same process to happen again and again. This would go on until about 3 in the morning. I would eventually fall asleep once again, but then suddenly I awoke, but this time it felt like I was awakened for a purpose, Or maybe a better way to describe this is that I felt like I was being watched. When I woke up laying in my hospital bed, something out of my right peripheral caught my attention. I would turn my head to the right and see a very tall, at least 10 foot tall, silhouette sitting in the hospital chair next to my window. Sitting down, this figure was so tall his head was almost to the ceiling. I would close my eyes and reopen them, as if to make my vision clear, as I didn't know what I was looking at. After doing that, the tall figure was still sitting there, and it seemed like he was looking at me, although he had no discernible eyes or facial features. Oddly enough, I was not scared, I guess, nor did I feel uncomfortable. In fact, almost quite the opposite, as it almost seemed like it was there to comfort me. I would look at the figure and say hello. In the fraction of a second, almost as if I missed him making a move, he was suddenly standing at the side of my bed, towering over me looking down. It's at this point where there must be some time missing or something, because the next thing I know, I'm laying flat on my back, still, but in a room that is completely white with no walls, no source of light, but very well illuminated. I seem to be laying on a piece of hard rock similar to granite. When I look up, there are now 2 black figures, both the same size with the same body structure. What was really weird though was that I felt I knew which one had taken me to this new place, and what one I had not had any confrontation with yet. At this point, I'm still pretty calm and not scared or feeling any harm will be done to me or anything. As I'm lying there, I turn to the first figure and ask him, "Is everything okay?" To which he will reply a simple yes, followed by the second figure saying to me, "We are just mending you." Then the first figure would pull a silver dome with a sort of bright shining light beaming down over the top of my head. This is where I have my second lapse in time, until this dome is pulled away from my face, that is. Once I awaken, I turn to the first figure, who I felt that I had a better connection with, or possibly just felt like that's who I should be speaking to. I asked him what was the purpose of this. He doesn't answer, but the second figure turns towards me and says, "It's that you have a new purpose." This is where my third lapse of time happens, and I'm floating through the foggy air from outside through my hospital window back into my bed. Almost as soon as I'm back in my bed, I was asleep. I would then sleep until 8:30 in the morning, and immediately when I woke up, this is the first thing that I thought about. And it felt so real, nothing like any dream that I've ever had, and I can recall every part of this experience, apart from the time lapses, obviously. Immediately, I would Google the definition of mending, a word which I would most likely never use in my life. Obviously, it means repair, to return to health and heal, improve an unpleasant situation, things of this nature. After this, I would call my wife and tell her the story of what I called being abducted by shadow people. Both of us were really confused on what the meaning of this was, but we both feel that it was real and not a dream. I also don't believe that it was a hallucination based on the pain medicine that I was on, as it was such a low dose and it was nothing that should really cause anything like this. Plus, I remember everything so vividly. The figures, though, both of them were very tall, at least 10 feet, and both were pitch black with no human features, that I could distinguish at least, other than the shape of their body. I remember seeing no fingers or nose or any facial features for that matter. It was more or less just a huge shadow. I don't necessarily know if they talked back to me or if I heard their voice telepathically, mainly because there really was no mouth. As I stated before, though, they didn't scare me or make me feel uncomfortable. In fact, it's almost like I was in a bliss of comfort when I was around them. For some reason, though, I do feel like the second figure was in charge, or the boss, mainly because he seemed to answer for the first figure certain questions, and seemed like he was leading the process, I guess. As I stated before too, I never saw them walk towards me, or necessarily move. Other than turning their body, it almost seemed like the silver dome wasn't even pulled down over my head via an arm or anything. Both of their voices were very different though, but both also very monotone. Since having this experience, I have not seen the shadow figures anymore, but the memory is still very strong and vivid in my mind, almost as if I am never to forget it, in fact. At the time of sharing this, it's now been a little over 2 months since it happened, and my wife recommended that I share it here to see if anyone has any similar situations or would maybe be able to make light of what happened, in fact. I did tell my nurse later that day about my experience, and she just said that that's creepy and that most people don't hallucinate off of that pain medicine, especially at the dose that I was given. Overall, it wasn't a bad experience, I guess. In fact, I actually feel really good about it, even if it was a little bit creepy. And as I stated before, I was not scared or uncomfortable at any moment. So, any comments or input is very much appreciated. So, this is not my encounter, it's my friend Q's. Q lives in a suburban place. She told me what was happening, crying on the phone one day. I was at work and she was not, so I kept texting her to ask why she was not there. She finally texted back telling me that something had woke her up in the middle of the night and she needed to call me about it. On call, Q told me what happened. Her mum was playing with her crystals like she normally does. Even Q thinks her mum is crazy, but then a few hours later, when Q was sitting on the couch, she heard banging from upstairs. She said that she went to go and check it out, but nobody was there. This obviously creeped her the heck out, so she ran back downstairs and found one of her siblings. When she went to bed, she fell asleep, but then she awoke to what she described as a shadow-looking thing. It apparently had no eyes or anything, but it felt like it was staring at her. She couldn't move out of fear, she said. Then she said that she closed her eyes and started praying and opened them to see that it was gone and she could move again. When she told me this, I told her that it was probably just paralysis or something to that effect, but she told me that she had many other encounters with it, and apparently she even had a name for it. Anyway, a few days after the whole call, she came up to me and started venting about how she was so scared to go to sleep, and even scared to go in dark rooms. One time she was trying to fall asleep, and then one of her sisters started screaming. Q got up and went to go and see what it was, and she said that she could feel something off in her sister's room, and said that she thought that she saw a glimpse of the shadow thing again. She asked what was wrong with her sister. Now, all of her siblings were in the room with her, and her sister told them all that she saw a shadow thing in her room. She said that she felt like it was staring at her. Q then went and asked her mum about this, and her mum confessed to recently bringing in a demonic spirit into their house. She said that she was playing with her crystals and said that she thought that she brought something from another dimension in. A few days after this incident, her mum and her siblings could feel something watching them, and sometimes even touching them too. Like, one time when Q was alone at home, she was watching TV. She was watching a horror film apparently, and right when the scary monster thing's face was about to be shown, her power went completely out. It was around noon when it happened, and everything just went completely dark. She remembers passing out on the couch suddenly and seeing something right when she was about to fall out. She then awoke and found a really large scratch on her back. She was obviously scared and annoyed as well because, well, there was blood on the couch and she had to clean it up. She showed me it though, and it goes to the bottom of her back to the side of her torso, on her back. And quite honestly, upon hearing all of this, it scared the heck out of me. I'll try and update the situation with Q, and I'll see if I can try and communicate with whatever this is. But can anyone let me know what Q should do? And can anyone tell me if Q's mum did bring something forth? We have tried a Ouija board and we talked to a few things. It really wasn't scary, and Q took her fingers off for a second and we could hear a bang come from upstairs. We asked it a few questions like, why are you here and what do you want? I'm now sharing this in the dark and I'm hearing things, and I'll do a more detailed update at some point in the future, but quite honestly, I just want all this to end because I just have a really weird feeling that something is wrong. A few years ago now, I was in a relationship with a guy named James, male and 20, for about 3 years. In the beginning, he was wonderful too. He supported me during my chemotherapy, was kind and funny, a bit crazy but not in a creepy way. He helped me surviving through my sickness, and I really wouldn't be alive without him right now. But the last year of our relationship, he changed. He wanted to try new experiences and began taking drugs. I didn't know that he was an addict until our breakup. He was totally different though. Jealous, a liar, sometimes really harsh with me, and he cheated on me before our breakup too. To be honest, I really had pity for him. So after the breakup, I'd spent 6 months helping him. I was a student, he was always at my home, in pain trying to fight his addiction. And after a while of trying to tell him to stop, after a month in an institute, he started drugs again, like 3 hours after leaving. It's a sad story, but it gets worse. You see, during our relationship, I chose my university to be close to him, so I sort of was a bit isolated. No friends, no family, no one. But 1 month after cutting the rope, something strange happened, and everything began with my cat. So one night, I went out to see a movie. On my way home, it started raining, and I remembered that I'd left my cat outside. My cat is beautiful and nice, but hates water, pretty much like every cat does, I guess, but I started running to get home early, and when I opened the door, my cat was on my sofa. At first I thought, oh, what an idiot I am. The cat wasn't outside at all. But then I hugged him and my cat was completely wet. That felt very weird to me at the time. I mean, I was like, what the heck? And then I thought maybe my neighbors could have opened my door to let him in or something. So I just sort of forgot about it. 1 week later, I began to realize that some of my clothes were missing, particularly my underwear. I do have ADHD though, so I blame myself for losing my own clothes at this point. But then the same thing happened with my food and some plates as well. Like one of my favorite bowls disappeared. It was a student's apartment, so not big enough to lose that many things really, but again, I just sort of blame myself. I even called myself a magician at one point, joking about how I can make anything disappear without even trying. But I completely lost it when I came back from my parents' house and discovered my place totally changed. There was even the neighbor's mail on my table with mysterious headphones. My photos on the wall were upside down, and a black umbrella was on my bed too. I didn't even own an umbrella at this point. It was honestly very scary seeing this. So I called my mum and then the police. Yes, always mum first, right? The officer was nice, but told me that really there was nothing that they could do, except taking my complaint, that is. I didn't know who was doing this to me, and so there really wasn't much to go off of. My ex never had my keys, and even when I said that I don't want to talk to him anymore, I stayed nice, and so I didn't think that anybody wanted to hurt me or was scared of me or anything. I mean, for what? Joking? Whatever the case, I slept with a knife for like 2 years after this. My neighbors started getting scared too, because we had a common basement and someone was breaking the door during the night. We found supplies in it even, like a blanket and a plate, not mine by the way. I had chains on the inside of my door, so I felt secure when I was inside, but I was scared to leave and come back to see my stuff all missing again. A few weeks go by, and in the evening I had to go to the grocery store, It took me like 30 minutes to get there and back. When I came back home, there was a note on my bedroom's mirror. Nothing was written on it, just a smiley face, and obviously that absolutely freaked me out, and I left immediately. Again, I called the police, and they told me that I should just leave the note and forget about it. Mind you, I didn't even have those kind of little sticky yellow paper sort of leaflet things, so I don't see how they were not concerned by this. In any case, I stayed with my mum for a week, spent all of my money on a camera and post for help on social media because I felt completely distraught. But after that, weirdly enough, there was just nothing. In the meantime, though, James's sister came to talk to me, saying that one of my favorite jackets was at their parents' house. I remembered wearing this jacket after saying stop to James, so again, I've got ADHD and I might have just forgotten it. But I didn't see James's parents for like 8 months at this time, so I found that pretty difficult to believe. Also, I suspected my neighbor who had one of my keys and was feeding my cat when I wasn't home, but she was in another country during most of this story, so that just didn't add up either. I talked with James last year about that, and he swore that he'd never done anything that weird, and told me that he was in another rehabilitation center when all of this was happening. Everything stopped after that, and I still don't know who did this or why. Maybe it was my ex, maybe someone else, but I don't really care. I'm just glad that it stopped and I don't have to deal with this anymore. And he is hoping that that was the last of it. I'm 24 now, but this happened when I was around 16. I was usually home alone because my mum worked during the day, and I was hanging out in my room like normal, just taking pictures on my phone, when I hear my mum close the door and walk into the kitchen. I yelled out, "Hi Mum," to which she said hi back. A few minutes go by, but I never saw my mum go into her room, so I walked out into the living room and I didn't see her. I checked the kitchen, her bedroom, and other places, but she just wasn't home. And I never heard her leave again. We had bells on the back of our door. I shrugged it off and went back to my room. I started playing on my phone again when I hear her whisper my name right next to my ear. I freaked out and looked around, but nobody was there. I also had my 2 dogs with me, but they weren't reacting to anything, so I didn't really think too much of it. Once I stopped freaking out, though, I called my mum to confirm that she was still at work, and she was. That actually used to happen a lot at that apartment, where I would hear her voice. Sometimes it would be random and just calling out my name. Other times it was whispering, and it was always freaky. I have a lot more weird paranormal stories from living in that apartment, so I'll definitely share more at some point, but this one, it always gives me goosebumps. Today, someone knocked at the door and I opened it, thinking that it was someone from my parents. And all I can say is that the whole experience was just odd. There was a shorter lady, late 60s, Hispanic woman looking down holding some pamphlets, and a tall, I would say 6'4", Hispanic man with sunglasses and a cap wearing a leather jacket. He seemed strange since it wasn't even a sunny day and didn't even look at me when I opened the door. He stood a few feet back from the woman, looking up at the siding of the building. I looked back at the woman who was now looking up at me but still not saying anything. And that was when I noticed her eyes. They were sort of light green or grey, and the pupils were like thin slits. Upon seeing that, I couldn't stop staring. I was sort of frozen, I guess, not comprehending what the heck I was looking at. My toddler ran over to say hello, and instantly I felt afraid and instinctively closed the door with just my head peeking, and she still hadn't said anything. Usually, Jehovah's Witnesses, those sorts of people, will have started talking by now. Maybe she hesitated to speak as she saw that I was uncomfortable or something. After staring at each other for what seemed like forever, I forced myself to break eye contact and look down at her hand to see what she was trying to peddle. They were brochures of pictures of Jesus, and she stuttered in Spanish that she wanted to make an invitation as she flipped through the brochures in her hand, but never actually handed one to me. I would have taken it to be nice, but she didn't, so after a short pause, I politely said no thank you, and I closed the door. I looked out of the window just after doing this, and I didn't see them go to any other houses or anything. In fact, they just sort of, disappeared. I thought it was very strange that they would drive to my neighborhood, knock on my door, and then drive away without trying any other houses. For all I know, she was probably just a normal old Jehovah's Witness lady, but I've never in my life seen or heard of anyone with eyes like that, and honestly was terrified. Has anyone else seen someone with eyes like this? I googled it and came across coloboma, but it looks nothing like what her eyes look like. I mean, they were literally like thin slits. Contacts maybe, but that's weird for a woman in her late 60s to be wearing cat or snake contacts like that. I don't know, something about the whole situation just felt very off. This happened to me and my partner in September of 2023. So, we were hanging out with our two friends, husband and wife. Their names are John and Mary. They decided to camp at Todd Lake Recreation Center, which is in George Washington National Forest, and invited us to spend time at their campsite, have a few beers, relax by the campfire, etc. My partner and I decided that we weren't up for overnight camping, but we were down to hang out for a bit. The recreation center was only 45 minutes from home, so we thought that we could drive if we didn't have but a few drinks, ate food, and chilled for a couple of hours. We get there at around 4:30 p.m. and we have camp snacks, sandwiches, chips, nothing special, and some alcoholic seltzers. We wander down to the lake and we let their dog swim, and then we decide to head back to the campsite and start up a fire. I knew that we weren't staying the night, so I kept track of how many drinks I had and the food that I ate to ensure that I was suitable for the drive later. In total, I had 5 seltzers the entire night, hours mind you. And not to sound like an alcoholic or anything, but 5 seltzers do not explain what happened to us that night. I can definitely handle my alcohol and am responsible while drinking by pacing myself, eating food and drinking water in between each beverage. Anyway, we were hanging by the fire with John and Mary, and the next thing you know, John says, "Hey, do you guys want to walk down to the lake?" And we respond, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." The campsite was a short walking path to the lake, probably half a mile away. It should only take a few minutes to get there, really, but this is when things get a bit weird. I look at my cell phone and see that it's 8:30 p.m. and decide to put my phone in the car before we walk down to the lake because, I don't want to lose it. But the next thing I knew, I woke up in the woods, passed out on the ground on a trail with my partner in the middle of George Washington National Forest, an hour away from their campsite, and John and Mary were nowhere to be found. My partner, he was on his back with his head turned to the side, and I was laying halfway on the moss and the other half on him with my head turned to the side, almost as if we were placed perfectly. We were also lost and both felt extremely confused and sick as well. We both started throwing up and had to take breaks walking out to try and find John and Mary's campsite. It took us an hour to get back, and it appeared that we had hiked an hour outside of the recreation center. We both had zero recollection of how we even got there, why we were both passed out in the middle of the woods at night, And why the heck 5 seltzers with food over a multiple hour span made either one of us to be so sick and lose memory at the same time. My partner was completely disoriented and started screaming for help at one point. I was begging him to be quiet because I felt so sick and had no idea where we were. I guess I just needed a moment to collect myself and get my bearings to try and hike out of our current situation. Something to know about us too is that we are both avid hikers and backpackers and very comfortable outdoors in nature, even alone. However, at that moment, I was so thankful I didn't wake up in the woods at night on a trail alone. Thankfully, he was with me, but the entire time, we both felt like we were being watched as we tried to find our way back. It was really unsettling. I was telling my partner when we were trying to find our way back to the campsite that something just felt very wrong, and when we got back, we needed to get into the car and we needed to leave. I don't know, I felt it in my bones, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what happened. We were both utterly shocked though that we both somehow conveniently blacked out simultaneously like that. And look, I know what you're all thinking. We must have been drugged, right? We felt that too, but why would John and Mary, our supposed friends, drug us like that? And why would they drug us and carry us deep into the forest? It just didn't add up. Anyway, we finally made it back to the campsite, and I first opened my car and grabbed my phone to see what the time is. And it was now 2:30 a.m. My heart sank. I mean, how did this even happen? How did it go from 8:30 p.m. when we were walking down to the lake, which was half a mile or less from their campsite, to 2:30 in the morning? Neither of us liked not knowing what happened to us in that lost time. So before we decided to leave, my partner knocked on their tent and said, "Hey, John, we're leaving. What happened, man? We need to get out of here. Something's off." John then replies, "Where's Mary?" And my partner and I both look at each other. Concerned, and say to John, "What do you mean? She's not in the tent with you?" And John replies, "No, I thought that she was with you two." Obviously, that was when we all decided to search for Mary. Now, John said the last thing that he remembered was we were hanging out by the fire and asked if we wanted to go down to the lake, and then hours later, he woke up underneath the picnic table at the campsite, not remembering how he got there. However, something seemed fishy and he was far too relaxed. Eventually, though, we found Mary down the trail to the lake, sort of slumped over, asleep in the woods near the campsite, and neither remembered what happened and why we all ended up in these places. No one can remember what happened for those few hours that just seemed to slip by. At this point, it was misty, dark, and foggy on the mountain, and I was shivering, teeth chattering, feeling sick, and I honestly was just ready to go home. We eventually got in the car and returned to our house, but it took a while to settle enough to sleep that night. When we spoke to John the next morning, he just laughed it off and said, "Haha, maybe we shouldn't drink so much next time that we hang out." I remember all of us hanging by the fire and then mentioning us going down to the lake, but I stayed back to deal with the dog, and you three went down there. John had changed his story from what he said the night before, and something just still didn't sit right with me. The Todd Lake Recreation Center was almost empty. I mean, we only saw one other family camping that night, and they weren't anywhere near our campsite, which was also a bit odd. My partner and I don't feel we drank enough to the point that it would cause us to black out, especially at the same time. So, what happened? We were sore and a little bit cut up, but our only thoughts were that there must have been something paranormal, or maybe they did drug us. Later though, I started to get flashbacks of memory, and all I remember was John's face on the beach, and then black. So, did aliens abduct us? Was it something from Appalachian folklore like Mothman or some other bizarre creature? Did we actually just drink too much? Did we get drugged? My partner lost his phone that night, so I called the ranger the following Monday, and they said that they found it in the woods, busted up between campsites 5 and 6, but John and Mary were camping at campsite 1. The ranger mailed it back to us because I didn't want to drive back there. I had a horrible pit in my stomach about that. The phone never cut back on, even though the front of the screen was perfectly intact. It was only the back of the phone that was busted up. And I guess that a part of me just doesn't want to know what's on that phone. The next day, my partner was violently ill as well, and I was shivering with teeth chattering and chill bumps all day. Honestly, we probably should have gone to the hospital. But in my 30 years, I've never experienced anything like this. And to this day, we are really skeptical about meeting new friends or having new people enter our lives. Either way, we're both very grateful that we made it home safely that night and that we have each other. But what do you guys think? My partner doesn't have social media, so I blocked John and Mary on mine, and we haven't seen them since. We moved to another state in 2024, not because of this reason, but I've dealt with a lot of PTSD and night terrors since this occurred as well. I now worry that if it was John or both of them, are they doing this to other people as well? And if they are, well, what should I do about it? So me and my boyfriend were playing video games in our bedroom on my birthday 5 nights ago for probably an hour or so. He was on our bed playing Xbox. I was on my PC, not even a foot away. When we finally got off of our game, we both took our headphones off and he looked at me saying, "Do you want to smoke a bowl?" And I responded with yes, and joined him on our bed. Around 10 seconds after he initially asked to smoke, he went to grab his phone and I was just looking at him. The whole house was silent as it was 11:30. But then, a female-sounding voice, almost identical to mine, but not quite, clear as day, said, "Can we take a bowl?" I wasn't expecting to hear my own voice, so I still don't know if I'm trying to think that it wasn't, but we both heard it, whatever it was. It was only a few words off from what my boyfriend said, so we first thought maybe a recording, a hacker, a device, relay, Alexa, maybe the cops. We truly have been over everything, and it's a dead end every time. It was a different sentence altogether as well, so we got over that option pretty quickly. My boyfriend had never believed in any type of alternative universe before this, but really it's the only, well, I hate to say it, but logical conclusion. We're both convinced that this was a glitch, and in some other timeline I said that to him instead. It's happened way too many times, me saying that exact phrase, an exact scenario even in the same tone. It's the perfect setup to make us question what actually happened. Was this maybe my past best friend visiting me on my birthday, legitimately wanting to smoke with us? I've been in a hard place ever since she passed in November of 22, begging for communication or really anything from her. So could this possibly have been good reason for spirits to come right in instead? A mimic, a ghost, maybe even a demon? We both got immediate chills and we left the house to my parents' place. I was hotter than I'd ever been in my life that whole night, sweat beating down my face while I was calm days and hours later. I woke up as well to a horrible dream of me and my boyfriend in our own bed at home, and in the dream I woke up, rushed to the end of the bed to see this demon figure, and before I could even react, I was awake at my parents' house, drenched in sweat, shaking. My boyfriend was dead asleep at the time, and I tried to shake him awake, but it took some time before he would wake up, which was really abnormal. Now, I've read about mimics and how they prey on those who are alone by sounding like a loved one or even yourself, but I have yet to find others like this specific scenario. how come we both heard it and then felt the exact same? The odds are almost non-existent on the mental or physical health factor, because even then my boyfriend and I would have, yes, had similar symptoms, but not hallucinate the same. Fast forward to 2 days later though, my boyfriend and I have to fly across the country. We're visiting family. We tried the best to put this out of our minds. Unfortunately though, I don't think I'll ever live my life the same after that, but I finally let my guard down and thought to myself, nothing can come with me, I'm safe. That was until we saw them. My boyfriend points out an older lady, very sort of witch-like, the kind you see and just know that they have way too much knowledge, that sort of vibe. But right in front of her, I pointed out a man, a spitting image of a demon in human form. He had leather and chains and a cloak cape, dressed in black head to toe, senpaku eyes, very violent looking. He was only staring at me too, in my eyes, and I could literally feel it after I looked away too. It wasn't just him though as well. The witch lady, she was doing it too, until they had to physically turn their heads to continue looking at me. Spooky, right? Well, the weirdest thing though is that my boyfriend, he didn't see the guy. Now, you tell me how in the world he sees this witchy older lady staring at me 2 feet away from the man in front of her and doesn't see him? Once we shared our concerns and agreed that that was definitely not normal, I began to realize that maybe I was losing my mind, or maybe I'm being watched or something. Anyway, the next day, we're out to dinner with my family and I go to use the restroom. I was hesitant because it was scary to me and dark, and I just didn't want to be alone, not even to go pee. I heard my boyfriend joking with my family about how I was scared, so of course I thought that he was the one who came up to the bathroom door and said, "Psst," but in the end, he wasn't. Another thing too, maybe related or not, we just moved into this house 4 months ago, and ever since I've been feeling just really drained, like no energy. My mood has been erratic at times. Maybe I'm vulnerable or something. I'm just really so lost right now, but I'm trying to stay positive. I also want to say that no, we were not just intoxicated or whatever. In the end, we didn't even get my bowl out on my birthday because it spooked us so bad. We also have carbon monoxide detectors in every single room in our house. They're on and working and have been thoroughly checked. No mold, no leaks. And I appreciate the concerns, but unfortunately, that's not the problem that we need solved here. Let me know what you think though. Glitch, ghost, mimic, loved one, demon? What do you think? Any feedback is greatly appreciated. We are still very jumbled up over this and don't quite know what to make of the situation. We're heading home now and I'm about to get on a plane, so wish us luck, I guess. Back in 2021, my family took a trip to Lake Sanitla in North Carolina, a beautiful lake that's rich in Native American history and surrounded by mountain trails. We decided to go on one of these trails on an overcast day. Now, I am not an athletic person by any means and suffer from asthma, so I was behind the rest of my family by myself. And about almost halfway through the hike, I suddenly heard my sister yell my birth name, but it sounded like it was off the trail. She never calls me by my real name, just my nickname that I've had since I was a baby. But it sounded like she was scared, so I was very tempted to run off and find her, but I knew that my sister wasn't stupid. She wouldn't go off the trail, even in the case of an emergency. I tried to double the pace and I quickly caught up to the rest of my family, and my sister was there with them, resting on some rocks next to a waterfall, chatting away and taking pictures. I asked my sister if she had called my name, but she didn't know what I was talking about. She had apparently been talking to our dad the whole time. So, I don't know what called my name that day, but I'm sure glad that I didn't listen to it. because honestly, who knows what would have happened to me. I haven't been to that trail since this encounter. I don't have a clue what called my name, but if you're educated in Appalachian folklore, then please do give me some insight on what happened to me. This happened a few years ago, and it still rattles me when I think about it. For context, I'm a female, and at the time was around 25 years old. I worked in an office of around 150 people, and one day I received an email from a coworker, but I didn't recognize his name. The email basically said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry if I did something to offend you. Given the situation, if you'd prefer to never see me again, I understand and will avoid you in the kitchen." I was extremely perplexed as I had no idea who this guy was, but I must have done something to offend this person, right? I responded back along the lines of, "I'm sorry if I offended you. Sometimes I zone out and it can be perceived as if I'm rude, so I apologize." After this response, though, he started getting irritated, basically denying my apology and acting all passive-aggressive about it. I wish that I would have kept a screenshot of these emails, but basically, he was confusing the heck out of me with this misunderstanding, so I sent him a message suggesting that we resolve this in person. That was a big mistake. He agrees to meet in the kitchen in the office. I go there and I immediately see a tall, 30-ish-year-old guy who I've seen around but never met before. I explained to him that I apologize, but I truthfully have no idea who he is. I've never even really met him before and don't want any issues. What happens after, though, made me very concerned. His face flushed bright red, and he looked visibly angry. He was stuttering and denying that I didn't know who he was, and then he says, "You've been staring at me for months. When you made eye contact with me, you gasped and ran away." And I mean, what the heck, right? I strongly denied this and told him that it was a mistake. He kept insisting that I've been staring at him for months and he could always see me doing it. Eventually, I realized that he couldn't see reason and I just decided to end the conversation. Upon reflection, I realized that it's possible that he thought that I was staring at him because when you walk in the hallway next to the kitchen, there's a room with glass at the end where a bench of desks are. His desk would be right in line of sight if I was walking down the hallway, and he had a funny sticker on his desk I would sometimes look at. But this seems like a huge stretch. Anyway, after this incident, a coworker pulls me over and asks me why I was talking to him. I explained the situation and she looked scared and told me that last year he appeared in the office in a bathrobe, raving like a madman, and apparently he wasn't fired, but it was bizarre to say the least. So, was I dealing with someone in the midst of psychosis? Was he dangerous? No clue, but I reported this ASAP to my manager, who took it seriously enough to tell his manager. I don't think that he works there anymore. Thankfully, I left this company 2 weeks later, but I was extra cautious to not go anywhere near this dude. I was never going to share this, but I happened across a story the other day that really shook me, and I guess that I'm just hoping for more information. This happened a few months ago. I live in Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee, so still pretty urban, suburban, but we got quite a few Bigfoot believers up north. I'm currently living alone in my old childhood house. There's miles of woods behind it, and I played in them alone all the time from a truly inappropriately young age to right up into my teens. Nothing overly weird, but I'm old enough now that I like to pre-game bedtime with an evening nap, mostly to keep from saying that I'm going to bed at 7. but I'll get up a little from 10 midnight or so and finish my day. And one night, I really overshot it. I woke up about 2:45 a.m. I'm taking my dog outside and listening to the family of owls that nest by the woods here, but he's just sort of staring at the darkness and growling. Now, we have raccoons, coyotes, all the normal stuff coming out at night. He's only done this a couple of times in his life, but my mind still jumps to the normal. As a woman living alone, though, it's worth paying attention to. But then I hear a sound, and to my ear, it sounds like me. More specifically, a tiny me calling my brother's name in this stupid way that I used to do when I was really little. Consciously, I just think, wow, I definitely misheard that. What a weird thought to bring up. And I set out trying to figure out what possible thing I could have heard that could in any way be misconstrued as a little girl's voice from the dark at 3 a.m. Leaves? Some weird bird or something? But I'm standing there, and the undercurrent of weird starts playing underneath my grown adult thoughts. What about all those skinwalker stories? But you're supposed to hear your loved one's voice calling your name, right? Not your voice from 30 years ago calling their name. Which led to a chilling thought of just how long something had to be back there watching me to come up with that sound. But overall, my illogical logic was sound. I still haven't moved. My puppy hasn't stopped growling. Then the owls hoot again, the most basic owl sound ever, followed immediately by this deep sort of masculine, humanish voice mocking them almost. And it was non-human enough that rather than confirming that there was a creepy dude in my forest, it confirmed the opposite. I said nope out loud, turned, and walked casually back into the house, pulling my dog with me. Once he was safely inside, I grabbed 2 of the biggest industrial flashlights that I had and went right back out. I'm ashamed to admit that I chickened out about 10 feet out of the door, chose life, and I just went back inside, locked all the doors, got my gun, yada yada yada. Now, I've been a night walker my whole life, and I can count on one hand the number of times that I've bumped into another person here. But eventually, I just decided that the neighbor's 18-year-old must have been out having a 3 a.m. joint in the woods or something, and just decided to scare me. Theory held up solid, until I heard this story on here the other day that multiple people have stories about something imitating an owl. Someone said that baby owls make that sound because they haven't learned to hoot properly yet. I've listened to that owl family for years though, and I have never heard that. I spent a lot of time researching baby owl sounds, hoping that that was the answer too, and all I could find was videos of them screeching. It was a very creepy sound, but nothing like what I heard. So, I guess my question is, could someone confirm for me either way, please? 9 out of 10, love living alone, but this is kind of throwing a wrench into my lifestyle here, and I guess I just want to clear this up. After I graduated last May, I decided to take up a job at my local jail. Nothing long-term, just figured that I'd work there for a year and save up some cash before college. Flash forward a little bit, and I'm only a few weeks into training. I've always liked the idea that ghosts really existed, but at that point I really couldn't say that I ever actually saw one. However, that all changed while taking post one night. The time was a little after 5 a.m. and I was sitting behind my desk, absolutely bored to tears. So, being a good little deputy, I was spinning around in my chair, honestly trying not to fall asleep. This was hour 11 of a 12-hour shift, so I'm just killing some time before I have to go home. Now, to give you a little visual of where I am, I'm in a giant room with a bunch of cells. At one end of the room is the officer's desk with big windows behind it. These windows are super reflective, so officers can look into the pod from the hallway, but inmates can't look out into the hallway from inside the pod. At the other end of this pod are all the cells. This particular pod has some cells that were behind a second pane of glass. I hope you're still with me because this is important, I promise. Anyways, I'm spinning around in my chair at my desk and happen to glance up at the reflective windows behind the desk. As I do, some movement catches my eye upstairs. There is someone walking around upstairs, out of their cell but behind the glass. I stare in disbelief for a moment and instantly freak out. I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of, holy heck, who is out of their cell at this hour? I'm about to get fired. I quickly turn around and see that nobody is up there now. I scramble and check the monitor that gives me control of the cell doors and make sure all of them are locked, which they are. I even go up there myself and make sure that everything is as secure as it can be. And somewhere in the middle of me making sure that I'm not about to get fired, it dawned on me that that was a ghost. I mean, there was no mistaking it. I 1000% saw someone up there. Now, I don't mean that I saw a quick little shadow or a suspicious-looking speck of dust or something. I was distinctly looking at someone in an orange jumpsuit walking around up there. I mean, I could tell you this guy's haircut, his height, general build, and even what kind of beard he had. To be honest, I was totally banking on this happening at some point. I mean, from my first day, I could tell that this place was really haunted. I mean, I'd heard the stories. So I immediately get my corporal on the horn and tell her excitedly that I just saw a ghost. But things don't end here. After that, I was bragging to anyone and everyone about my little encounter, with some mixed reactions. My sergeant says that he doesn't really believe in ghosts, but some deputies told me that they've definitely seen some paranormal stuff on duty too. However, it's what the sergeant on day shift shared that has really stuck with me. He told me that they apparently had an inmate end their own life in that same pod a few years prior. I had already been told that by a few people who had been there a while. I gave a description of the guy that I saw, and we decided to look up the inmate just to see if they looked the same. And I'm telling you right now that it was definitely him. It was the guy that I saw walking around upstairs. Right down to his skinny face and his billy goat beard. There was no mistaking it. I've talked to some inmates about it too, and I've had more than one tell me that sometimes they can see or hear someone walk by their cells and peeking in at late hours of the night. It can't be a correctional officer that they're talking about because they're always wearing an orange jumpsuit. And well, that's my one and only spooky experience. I didn't have any notable encounters after that as well. I hope you found this interesting, and it's definitely something that is going to stick with me. My mum was born and raised in the high country of east central Montana. She came from a ranching people, and her father and my grandfather were genuine cowboys. She often did work around the ranch with him, so really not much shakes her to her soul. Except for what happened when she had to run into town when I was only 8 months old. The ranch that she was raised on was almost 2 hours away from the nearest town. You had to drive north on a highway for 30 minutes, then you had to drive on a dirt road for another 45 minutes across the Montana high country to get to the ranch where she was raised. I'm emphasizing this because it not only shows how far out into the pretty much nowhere she lived at the time, but it plays into why this story becomes so disturbing. So like I said, my mum had to run into town to get some groceries and baby supplies for me. She was driving on the long and isolated dirt road back to the ranch when she reaches into her purse on the passenger seat to get something. It slips out of her hand and into the passenger footwell. Fair enough. She then has to stop the car so that she can safely retrieve what she had dropped. She grabs it, and as she sits back up, she looks into the rearview mirror and sees a man about 100 feet behind the car running at her. Needless to say, she puts the car back into gear and she gets the heck out of there. As she's looking back at me in the car seat, making sure that I'm okay, she sees the guy give up running after her and run back into the ditch to hide. Of course, when she gets home, she tells her mum and dad, my grandparents, about what had happened, and they are stunned. But here's where it gets really disturbing, at least psychologically. My mum didn't see any cars or trucks parked along that dirt road for the entire way to the ranch. She also didn't see any people walking along the highway or dirt road, which raises even more questions. Like, how did he get out there? Why was he out there? And even more disturbing, what would he have done to my mum or an 8-month-old me? My mum said that the more she thought about it, the more disturbing it became. I've only ever asked my mum about this story twice, and after the second time, she told me to never ask her about it again. And to be honest, I completely understand why. I get messed up thinking about it too, and I mean, I can only imagine how she felt having directly experienced it. When I was in high school, I had a really strange encounter riding my bike home from work one day. So when I was a senior in high school, I worked at a Target store from about 4 p.m. until about 10 p.m., 4 or 5 nights a week. After helping close the store, Z out the registers and other final closing tasks, my co-workers and I were usually out of the building and on our way home before 10:30 p.m. The store was not too far from a bike path that also went close to my home. It took me about 15 to 20 minutes to ride my bike home from work, down a sort of small bike path and into a large subdivision. At about the midway point home, there was a section of the bike trail that went through an undeveloped field and was very poorly lit. I remember I was slowing down to change the radio station on my CD or Walkman or sort of radio thing. Yes, I'm dating myself here a bit. When suddenly, I see a dark figure about maybe 100 feet or 30 meters away from me on my right start running at me from the dark field. Fight or flight instantly kicked in and I started riding my 18-speed mountain bike so fast that I felt like I could have qualified for the Tour de France. As I was escaping, I took a quick peek back and I saw a guy in black, fully black, with a ski mask and everything, attempting to chase after me for a few moments. Needless to say, what was normally a 15 to 20 minute bike ride turned into a 5-minute top speed and top gear bike ride home. I also obviously didn't sleep well that night, but I still occasionally think about that encounter in my darker moments. So, this happened today and I really have no idea what to think about it. I am a 30-year-old single female, live in a small town in Northern California. It's been pretty dreary weather the past couple of days, with scattered light showers after a surprisingly hot weekend last weekend. It's a very rural area. In fact, you have to go to the neighboring town for high school, groceries, etc. But anyways, I was on my way home just to drop off a few things and head out again. My road is connected 2 ways to the main road, almost like a loop, so I have 2 choices on how to get home. As I approach my little road from the main road from one direction, I noticed stuff on the ground just at the turnoff from the main road to my little road. It looked like roadkill, but as I drove over it and stopped to see, it was a black cow hoof and a single skinned cow leg and a large round organ of some sort, I'm assuming a stomach, all scattered close to one another, and looked like they were just plopped there, not hit or dragged by a car, because there was no blood around it or skid marks or anything. It was super weird, but I drove on thinking that, I don't know, maybe someone hit a cow or something. As I'm continuing on down this little road on the way to my driveway, probably a mile, I pass another thing on the road and stop to look closer. It's a whole pile, a large pile of intestines sitting in the road. Again, almost like they were placed there, not dragged or splattered or anything. I keep going and I get to my driveway, then up to my house. I mention what I saw to my husband, and he agrees that it's a bit weird and suggests that I should go the other way out to finish my errands instead of back near the guts and all that stuff on the road. I agree, and I see nothing on the little road in the other direction. Well, my errands take me no more than 40 minutes max, so I decide to take the same route as my original drive to see the stuff on the ground. But when I get there, there's absolutely nothing there at all. And not even a mark where any of the body parts had been. No stains, no remnants, absolutely nothing. Not one piece of anything. Not on the main road, not on the little road. I don't know. So I'm just thinking about all the possibilities, I guess. Someone could have scooped up and disposed of the remains, and also hosed down the road in 40 minutes between when I drove through. It's a very, very rural town though, so this is impressive response time by someone with the means to clean up remains so well like that. Maybe I just hallucinated the stuff on the road, but I have no history of mental illness or anything. Scavengers, maybe they got all the remains, but picked the road completely clean in 40 minutes? Not only just on the main road where the leg and hoof and the stomach were, but also a mile or so down my little semi-private road where the intestines were separately. Maybe the rain washed everything away. It's been barely a drizzle today, and the amount and weight of the remains on the road had to be way too much for a little sprinkle to wash anything away. I don't know. It's been a gloomy, weird day, and this was the cherry on top in terms of weirdness. And I thought that I would share it here because, I don't know, it's just creepy. And I just cannot imagine how they just disappeared like that, with absolutely nothing to suggest that they were ever there.